The wagon wheel hit another rock, and Evelyn Mercer's head slammed against the wooden side panel for what felt like the 100th time. She didn't cry out. Crying meant weakness, and weakness meant her father won. She refused to let him win anymore. Through the gaps in the canvas cover, she watched the landscape transform from rolling green hills into something harder, meaner. The trees thinned out until there were just scattered scrub bushes clinging to red dirt. The air tasted like dust and distance. This was the frontier, the place civilized people whispered about in drawing rooms, the place where men went to disappear or die. And apparently, the place where fathers sent daughters they were ashamed of. How much longer? Evelyn asked the driver, a grizzled man named Pete, who hadn't spoken more than 10 words since they'd left 3 days ago. Pete spat tobacco juice over the side. Another hour, maybe less if these horses don't give out. And you'll take me back after? He didn't answer. That was answer enough. Evelyn pulled her shawl tighter even though the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. The fabric was expensive. Her mother had insisted she wear something presentable for her wedding day. The memory of that morning made her stomach turn. Get in the wagon, Evelyn. Her father's voice had been flat, emotionless, like he was ordering livestock moved from one pen to another. Father, you promised Celeste to Mr. Blackridge. The agreement is whatever I say it is. His face had been red with whiskey and rage. Celeste is too valuable to waste on some frontier brute. You, on the other hand, he'd looked her up and down with naked disgust. You should be grateful anyone's willing to take you at all. Celeste had watched from the parlor window, her beautiful face carefully blank. She hadn't said goodbye, hadn't even pretended to be sorry. The wagon lurched again this time, coming to a complete stop. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. We're here, Pete announced. She pushed aside the canvas and stepped down onto ground that felt foreign under her boots. The first thing she noticed was the wind, constant, pushing against her like an invisible hand trying to shove her back where she came from. The second thing was the silence. Not peaceful silence, hungry silence, like the land was waiting to see what she'd do. Blackridge Ranch spread out before her like a painting done in browns and reds and fading greens. The main house sat low and sprawling, built from timber and stone that looked like it had grown out of the earth itself. Outbuildings dotted the landscape, barns, corrals, storage sheds. Horses moved in distant pastures, and somewhere she could hear cattle lowing. Men appeared from various directions, drawn by the wagon's arrival like crows to a carcass. They were rough-looking, sun-hardened, the kind of men who'd seen things that would make city folk faint. They stared at her with undisguised curiosity. That's her? One of them muttered. Thought she was supposed to be pretty. Maybe she's got a pretty sister somewhere, another replied, and they laughed. Evelyn kept her face neutral. She'd had practice at that. The front door of the main house opened, and a man stepped out onto the porch. Mason Blackridge. Evelyn had never seen a photograph, had only heard her father's descriptions of the rough but wealthy rancher who'd offered a small fortune for a well-bred wife. Those descriptions hadn't prepared her for the reality. He was tall, over 6 feet easily, with shoulders that strained against his work shirt. His face was hard angles and sun damage, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. His hair was dark, shot through with early gray at the temples, even though he couldn't be older than 35. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Dark, calculating, cold as a winter creek. Those eyes swept over her now, and she watched his expression shift from expectation to confusion to something that looked a lot like fury. Who the hell are you? His voice matched his appearance, rough, direct, demanding. Evelyn Mercer, she said, lifting her chin. Your bride. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to pause. Mason came down the porch steps slowly, each footfall deliberate. He circled her like a buyer inspecting a horse, and Evelyn forced herself to stand still, even though her instincts screamed to run. My bride, he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet, was supposed to be Celeste Mercer. Beautiful, accomplished, exactly as described in the arrangement. I'm her sister. I can see that. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. What I want to know is why Charles Mercer thinks he can play me for a fool. He doesn't think you're a fool, Mr. Blackridge. Evelyn's voice came out steadier than she felt. He thinks you're desperate enough not to care about the difference. One of the ranch hands whistled low. Mason's jaw tightened. Desperate, he said slowly. Is that what you think I am? I think you paid a bride price for a wife, and my father decided to keep his favorite daughter while sending the one he doesn't want. I think you're angry about being cheated, and I think... She swallowed hard. I think I don't have anywhere else to go. That last part came out smaller than she'd intended, more honest than was probably smart. Mason stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to Pete, who was still sitting on the wagon. You taking her back? Pete shook his head. Contract says deliver Charles Mercer's daughter to Blackridge Ranch. Didn't specify which daughter. Far as I'm concerned, job's done. He tipped his hat. Good luck to you both. The wagon rolled away, and Evelyn watched her last connection to the world she knew disappear into a cloud of red dust. Sir? One of the ranch hands stepped forward. Want us to send word to Mercer? Demand he make it right? Mason didn't take his eyes off Evelyn. What good would that do? You really think a man who'd pull this kind of switch would admit fault? He rubbed his jaw, thinking. How old are you? 24. Educated? I can read, write, do figures. I speak French and passable German. Can you cook? The question threw her. Some. The basics. Can you ride? I've been on a horse, but I wouldn't say... Can you shoot? No. Can you do anything useful? The words hit like slaps, each one designed to cut. Evelyn felt her cheeks burn, but kept her voice level. I can learn. Mason laughed, but there was no humor in it. Learn. On a working ranch in the middle of Red Hollow Valley. He shook his head. Lady, this isn't Boston. We don't have time to teach finishing school graduates how to not die. I'm not asking for lessons in survival, Mr. Blackridge. I'm asking for a chance to... You're asking for charity. He cut her off. Your father sold me a bill of goods, sent me a replacement he didn't want, and now you're standing on my land expecting me to what? Play the gentleman and honor an arrangement that was broken the second you stepped off that wagon? I'm expecting you to do whatever you're going to do, Evelyn said, and she was surprised by the steel in her own voice. Send me away, put me to work, lock me in a room. I don't care. But stop pretending you're the only one who got cheated here. At least you still have a home. The ranch hands had gone quiet, watching the exchange like it was a stage performance. Mason's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Tom? He called, without looking away from her. One of the men stepped forward. Yeah, boss? She stays. Relief flooded through Evelyn so fast she almost swayed. But, Mason continued, and the relief evaporated. She works. No special treatment, no allowances. She pulls her weight or she's gone. Understood? Understood, Evelyn whispered. I didn't hear you. Understood, she said louder. Tom, get her set up in the upstairs room, the small one. He finally looked away from her, addressing his men. Show's over. Get back to work. The hands dispersed reluctantly. Tom, a lean man with kind eyes and graying temples, gestured toward the house. This way, ma'am. Evelyn followed him up the porch steps and through the front door. The interior was sparse but clean, rough furniture built for function rather than beauty, worn rugs on wood floors, a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall. It smelled like leather and smoke and coffee. Stairs are here, Tom said, leading her up a narrow staircase. Boss man uses the master bedroom down the hall. You'll be in here. He opened a door to reveal a small room barely big enough for the single bed and washstand it contained. A tiny window looked out over the back pastures. No curtains, no decorations, nothing soft. It's fine, Evelyn said, because what else could she say? Tom looked uncomfortable. Look, I'll be straight with you. Mason's a hard man, but he's fair. You do your work, don't cause trouble. You'll be all right. But this valley, he trailed off, searching for words. It's not forgiving. People come out here thinking it'll be an adventure, and the land breaks them in a week. I'm not looking for an adventure, Evelyn said quietly. I'm just looking for somewhere to exist. He nodded slowly. Supper's at sundown, kitchen's downstairs, back of the house. I'd suggest showing up on time. He paused at the door. And ma'am, don't expect Mason to warm up to you anytime soon. His first wife died 3 years back and he's been, well, let's just say he's not the marrying type anymore. The door closed behind him and Evelyn was alone. She sat on the bed, A hard mattress, scratchy blanket, and let herself feel the full weight of everything that had happened. She was hundreds of miles from everything she knew, living in a house with a man who resented her existence, about to start a life she had no preparation for. This was supposed to be Celeste's fate. Beautiful, charming Celeste, who could wrap any man around her finger with a smile. Their father had arranged it perfectly. Celeste would marry the wealthy rancher, secure her future, and the family would benefit from the connection. But Celeste had cried, had begged, had thrown one of her famous fits until their father relented. "Send Evelyn," she'd suggested, dabbing at perfectly dry eyes. "She's plain enough that he won't be distracted from his work, and she's so desperate for approval she'll try harder than I ever would." And their father had agreed. Evelyn stood and walked to the small window. The sun was dropping toward the horizon, painting the sky in violent oranges and reds. Below, she could see Mason talking to a group of ranch hands near the largest barn. Even from this distance, she could read the tension in his shoulders, the sharp gestures as he gave orders. He didn't want her here. Nobody wanted her here. But here was where she was. Evelyn pressed her palm against the glass, feeling the warmth that had collected there during the day. The frontier stretched out endlessly in every direction, raw and unforgiving and completely indifferent to her fears. "All right," she whispered to herself. "If this place is going to break me, it's going to have to work for it." Coco. Sundown came fast. Evelyn made her way downstairs following the sound of voices and the smell of food. The kitchen was larger than she'd expected, with a massive cast iron stove and a long table that could seat a dozen men. Currently, 8 ranch hands were crammed around it, talking and laughing while a stout older woman moved between stove and table with practiced efficiency. The conversation died when Evelyn appeared in the doorway. "Well," the older woman said, wiping her hands on her apron, "you must be the surprise bride. I'm May. I cook, clean, and keep these animals from living like complete savages." She pointed to an empty spot at the table. "Sit. Food's getting cold." Evelyn slid into the indicated seat, hyper-aware of every eye on her. The man to her left, young, with sun-bleached hair, scooted his chair away slightly like whatever she had might be contagious. May slapped a plate of food in front of her. Beef, potatoes, beans. Simple, but substantial. "Eat up. Out here, if you don't eat, you don't work. And if you don't work, you don't stay," Evelyn finished. "Smart girl." May turned back to the stove. Mason entered through the back door, bringing the smell of horses and dust with him. He'd washed up. His hair was damp, face clean, but he still moved like a man who'd put in a full day of hard labor. He took the seat at the head of the table without acknowledging Evelyn's presence. "Tom," he said, reaching for the serving bowl, "how many head did we move to the north pasture?" "About 300. Lost 2 to that ravine. Looked like they'd been there a few days." "Damn." Mason chewed thoughtfully. "We need to fence that section off before we lose more. Jake, that your priority tomorrow." The conversation flowed around her. Cattle counts, fence repairs, water levels, a mention of someone named Crow that made several men shift uncomfortably. Evelyn ate quietly, listening, trying to build a mental map of how this place worked. So, one of the younger ranch hands, the one who'd moved away from her, spoke up during a lull. "What do we call you? Mrs. Blackridge?" Every fork paused. Mason's voice was ice. "You call her ma'am, or Miss Mercer. She's not Mrs. Blackridge." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Evelyn felt her face burn but kept her eyes on her plate. "Yes, sir," the hand mumbled. "And while we're laying down rules," Mason continued, his gaze sweeping the table, "she works like everyone else. No special consideration, no protection. She pulls her weight or she's gone. Clear?" A chorus of "yes, sir" followed. "Good. Now someone tell me why the well pump on the east side is still broken." The conversation lurched back into motion, but Evelyn had lost her appetite. She forced down a few more bites. Waste wasn't tolerated, she could tell, then stood and carried her plate to the washing basin. "Leave it," May said gruffly. "I'll handle dishes. You look dead on your feet." "I can help." "You'll help tomorrow. Tonight, you sleep. You're going to need it." May's expression softened just slightly. "It gets easier. Not easy, but easier." Evelyn nodded and slipped out of the kitchen. She could feel Mason's eyes on her back as she left, heavy and assessing. The upstairs room felt smaller than it had that afternoon. Evelyn changed into her nightdress by the light of a single candle. There was no lamp, and slid under the rough blanket. The bed was hard, the pillow flat, and somewhere outside a coyote howled long and lonely. She'd cried herself to sleep plenty of times back in Boston, after particularly cruel comments from her father. After watching Celeste receive praise for the smallest accomplishments while her own achievements went unnoticed, after another failed attempt to be the daughter her parents wanted. But tonight, she didn't cry. Tonight, she stared at the dark ceiling and made a promise to herself. She would learn everything: how to cook on that massive stove, how to ride without falling off, how to shoot, rope, brand, whatever it took. She would work harder than every man on this ranch. She would become indispensable, not because she wanted Mason Blackridge's approval, but because approval could be withdrawn. Skills couldn't. The house settled around her, wood creaking as it cooled from the day's heat. Somewhere below, she heard heavy footsteps. Mason, moving through the first floor, checking locks probably, making sure his unwanted guest hadn't stolen the silver and run. The footsteps paused outside her door. Evelyn held her breath. After a long moment, they moved on. His bedroom door closed with a decisive click. She released the breath slowly and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, the real work began. Dawn arrived with a fist pounding on her door. Up, May's voice carried through the wood. Breakfast starts in 20 minutes. You're helping me serve. Evelyn scrambled out of bed, splashed cold water from the basin on her face, and dressed as quickly as her shaking hands allowed. She'd brought 3 practical dresses, anticipating a life as a rancher's wife might require less finery. Now she was grateful for that small bit of foresight. The kitchen was already chaos when she arrived. May moved like a general commanding troops, pointing at pots and pans and barking orders. You, grab that platter. Careful, it's hot. Yes, I know you're not used to hot things, but out here everything is either burning or frozen, so adapt. Put it on the table. Not there, where the men can actually reach it. Evelyn followed instructions, trying not to get in the way. The ranch hands filed in, looking even more exhausted than they had at dinner. Mason came last, his shirt already dusty. Miss Mercer, he said, and it took her a second to realize he was talking to her. After breakfast, Tom will show you the basics. Water hauling, chicken feeding, that sort of thing. Think you can handle that? Yes, sir. We'll see. He sat down and immediately started shoveling food into his mouth like he was fueling a machine. Breakfast was a silent, efficient affair. These men didn't have energy to waste on conversation. They ate, wiped their mouths, and headed out into the pre-dawn light to begin another day of brutal work. When the last one had gone, May handed Evelyn a bucket. Well, you heard the man. Tom's waiting by the barn. Tom turned out to be patient, which Evelyn appreciated since she had no idea what she was doing. He showed her how to prime the pump, harder than it looked, and how to carry 2 full buckets without spilling, showed her where the chickens nested and how to collect eggs without getting pecked to death. They can smell fear, he said seriously. So don't be afraid. That's not how fear works, he grinned. No, but it's good advice anyway. The morning stretched into afternoon in a blur of physical labor that left Evelyn's arms trembling and back screaming. Water hauling alone seemed endless. The house needed water, the animals needed water, the men needed water, and every bucket had to be pumped, carried, dumped, and returned for refilling. You're doing good, Tom said as she set down her 10th pair of buckets. Most city folk quit after 3. I'm not most city folk, Evelyn managed, though she wasn't sure that was true. I'm starting to see that. The afternoon brought new challenges. May put her to work in the kitchen, teaching her how to cook for a dozen men with limited ingredients. Everything was about volume and efficiency. Nothing was about presentation or delicacy. Burn it and they'll complain, but eat it anyway, May explained. Undercook it and someone gets sick. Sick men can't work. Men who can't work don't keep their jobs. So learn to use that thermometer. Evelyn burned the first batch of biscuits. The second batch came out better. By the third, May nodded approval. You might not be completely useless after all. It was the closest thing to a compliment Evelyn had heard since arriving. That night at dinner, she noticed one of the ranch hands watching her with slightly less hostility. Another actually nodded when she refilled his coffee. Small things. Tiny shifts. But after a lifetime of being invisible or despised, she noticed. Mason didn't speak to her directly, but she caught him watching her carry a heavy pot to the table without asking for help. His expression was unreadable. 3 days passed in similar fashion: wake before dawn, work until her hands bled, fall into bed too exhausted to think. Then do it again. On the 4th day, Tom brought her out to the corrals. "Time you learned to ride properly," he announced. Evelyn eyed the horses nervously. They were much bigger up close than they'd seemed from a distance. "That one," Tom pointed to a dappled gray mare. "Steady. Won't throw you unless you do something monumentally stupid." "How will I know if I'm doing something monumentally stupid?" "You'll know because you'll be flying through the air." He wasn't wrong. The first 3 attempts to mount ended with Evelyn sprawled in the dust. The 4th attempt succeeded, but she gripped the saddle horn so tightly her knuckles went white. "Relax," Tom called. "She can feel your fear, remember?" Still not how fear works. But slowly, awkwardly, Evelyn began to understand the rhythm of it. How to move with the horse instead of against it. How to use her legs to communicate. How to trust that the animal beneath her didn't actually want to kill her. By the end of the hour, she was circling the corral at a walk without looking like she was about to vomit from terror. "Progress," Tom declared. That evening, as she limped toward the house, every muscle she owned was filing formal complaints. She passed Mason working on a section of fence. He looked up as she approached. "You're still here," he observed. "Where else would I be?" "Most people run by day 3. There's a stage that goes through Coldwater Springs twice a month. Figured you'd be on it." "Sorry to disappoint." He studied her for a moment, hammer dangling from one hand. "You're not what I expected." "Neither are you," Evelyn said before she could stop herself. His eyebrow, the one with the scar through it, rose. "That's so. My father said you were desperate and crude. You're just—" She searched for the right word. "Angry. Maybe I'm both. Maybe. But desperate men don't build things like this." She gestured at the ranch. "They survive. You're doing more than surviving." Something flickered across his face too fast to read. "Get inside. You look like you're about to fall over." It wasn't kind, but it wasn't cruel either. Evelyn would take it. She made it to her room, closed the door, and looked at her hands. Blisters had formed, broken, and were forming again. Her nails were ragged. Her skin was sunburned and peeling. She looked nothing like Celeste anymore. The thought made her smile. Mbake. 2 weeks into her new life, Evelyn woke to shouting. She stumbled to her window and saw chaos in the yard below. Men running, horses being saddled frantically, Mason's voice cutting through the commotion giving sharp orders. She dressed quickly and ran downstairs. May was in the kitchen, face grim. "What's happening?" "Cattle thieves hit the north pasture last night. Took about 50 head, from what the scouts are saying. Maybe more." "Thieves? Welcome to Red Hollow Valley, girl. Law's 2 days away on a fast horse. Out here, you protect what's yours, or you lose it." Evelyn moved to the window. Mason was mounted on a black stallion that looked mean enough to bite through iron. He was armed, rifle in a saddle scabbard, pistol on his hip. The men with him were similarly equipped. "They're going after them," she said quietly. "Course they are. You don't let thieves walk away with your property. Sets a bad precedent." "Is it dangerous?" May gave her a long look. "Everything out here is dangerous, honey. You worried about him?" "I'm worried about all of them." "Good answer." May handed her a basket. "Make yourself useful. Chickens still need feeding, danger or not." The day dragged with agonizing slowness. Every woman and man too old or young to ride out had double duties, covering the work of those who'd gone. Evelyn threw herself into it, grateful for the distraction. They returned at sunset, dusty, exhausted, and 50 head lighter. "Lost the trail at Rocky Creek," Tom explained as he unsaddled his horse. "They knew what they were doing, split the herd 3 ways, covered their tracks. We might have recovered 15 head. The rest are gone." Mason looked like he wanted to break something. He dismounted stiffly, favoring his left side. "You're hurt," Evelyn said before thinking better of it. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're— Oh. I said I'm fine." His voice was sharp enough to cut. "Get inside." She almost listened, almost turned and walked away like a good, obedient woman who knew her place. Instead, she stood her ground. "Let me see." "Miss Mercer." "Let me see or I'll get May, and she'll make you let her see, and we both know she's a lot less gentle than I'll be." For a second, she thought he'd refuse. Then something in his expression shifted, resignation maybe, or just exhaustion, and he pulled up his shirt. A dark bruise spread across his ribs, angry and swollen. "One of them got a good kick in before I could dodge," he admitted grudgingly. "Can you breathe all right?" "Hurts, but yeah." "Then probably not broken, but you need ice." She looked around. "Do we have ice?" "Cold creek water will have to do." He lowered his shirt. "Why do you care?" The question caught her off guard. "Why wouldn't I? I'm not exactly welcoming, haven't been kind, barely acknowledge you exist most days. So why do you care if I'm hurt?" Evelyn thought about lying, about giving him some answer that would sound noble or strategic. But she was too tired for games. "Because this is my home now," she said simply, "whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not. And you don't let your home fall apart, even the parts of it that don't want you there." Mason stared at her for a long moment, then quietly, "Get me that cold water then." It wasn't warmth, it wasn't friendship, but it was something. The weeks that followed brought a rhythm Evelyn was starting to recognize. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. The physical labor that had nearly killed her at the start was becoming manageable. Her hands developed calluses, her arms grew stronger. She learned to anticipate May's needs in the kitchen and Tom's instructions in the yard. She also learned the politics of Red Hollow Valley. It started innocently enough, overheard conversations at dinner, comments dropped by the ranch hands, May's occasional bitter observations. But slowly, a picture emerged. Mason Blackridge wasn't just fighting thieves and drought. He was fighting a man named Victor Crow, who owned the largest ranch in the valley and wanted more. Crow controlled the water rights to several major creeks. He had politicians in his pocket. He had more men, more money, more of everything. And he was slowly strangling every smaller ranch around him. "Why doesn't someone stop him?" Evelyn asked Tom one afternoon while they mended fence. "How?" "He owns the sheriff, controls the supply routes. Anyone who challenges him finds their cattle dead, their wells poisoned, their hay barns burned down. After a while, people learn to keep their heads down." "But Mason hasn't." "No," Tom agreed, hammering in another post. "Mason hasn't. That's why Crow wants Blackridge Ranch. Not because he needs it, because Mason's the last one telling him no." That night, Evelyn watched Mason at dinner with new eyes. The weight he carried wasn't just the physical burden of running a ranch. It was the weight of being the last line of defense for everyone who couldn't defend themselves. No wonder he had no patience for a bride he hadn't chosen. A storm rolled in 3 days later. Not rain, but wind that screamed across the valley like something alive and furious. Evelyn had never experienced weather like this. Back east, storms were inconvenient. Here, they were apocalyptic. "Get everything tied down," Mason shouted over the roar. "Livestock in the barns, move!" Everyone scrambled. Evelyn helped Tom herd the horses into the stable, fighting wind that tried to knock her sideways. Dust filled the air so thick she could barely see 3 feet ahead. "Get inside!" Tom pushed her toward the house. "I've got this." She ran for the porch, but halfway there she heard it, a terrified screaming that cut through even the wind. She turned and saw a calf caught in loose wire near the fence, thrashing and making everything worse. No one else was close enough. Everyone was securing their own disasters. Evelyn ran toward the calf. The wind hit her like a fist, driving grit into her eyes and mouth. She stumbled, caught herself, kept going. The calf was bleeding where the wire had cut into its leg, panic making it dangerous. "Easy," she gasped, though the wind stole her voice. "Easy. I've got you." She'd helped May with enough kitchen disasters to know that panicking made everything worse. So even though her own heart was trying to beat out of her chest, she forced her hands to be steady, forced her voice to be calm. The wire was tangled in ways that made no sense. She couldn't see how to free it without cutting, and she didn't have anything to cut with. So she started unwinding it by hand, ignoring the sharp edges biting into her palms. The calf kicked. Evelyn dodged, barely. "Work with me here," she muttered. "I'm trying to save your ungrateful ass." One loop free, then another. The wind screamed louder, and somewhere she heard a crash as something came loose and smashed against a building. Almost there. The final loop came free, and the calf bolted immediately, leaving Evelyn kneeling in the dirt with blood running down her hands. Strong arms grabbed her, hauling her to her feet. "Mason," He half carried, half dragged her to the house. The door slammed behind them, cutting the wind to a muffled roar. "What the hell were you thinking?" He was shouting, even though they were inside now. "You could have been killed. A piece of debris, a loose board, anything could have—" "The calf was dying," Evelyn interrupted. "It's a calf. We have hundreds of them. That doesn't make it worthless." They stood there in the dim hallway, both breathing hard, both filthy with dust and sweat. Mason's expression was wild, almost frightened. "You don't risk your life for a calf. You just don't." "Why not?" "Because calves can be replaced." The words came out harsh, raw. "You can't." The silence that followed felt enormous. Evelyn looked down at her bleeding hands. "I should—" "May probably has bandages. Let me." Mason took her wrist gently, the first time he'd touched her with anything approaching care, and led her to the kitchen. May was there, securing shutters, but she took one look at them and wisely made herself scarce. Mason pumped water into a basin and guided Evelyn's hands into it. The water turned pink. "You're going to need to learn the difference between bravery and stupidity," he said quietly, cleaning the cuts with surprising gentleness. "Are they really that different?" "Yeah, stupidity is risking everything for nothing. Bravery is risking everything for something that matters." He paused. "Which one was this?" Evelyn watched him work, this hard man with careful hands. "You tell me." He didn't answer, just finished cleaning her hands, wrapped them in clean cloth, and stepped back. "You did good," he said finally. "Stupid, but good." It was the first real compliment he'd given her. Evelyn smiled. "I'll take it." The storm raged through the night, but inside Black Ridge Ranch, something had shifted. Not broken, not fixed, just shifted. And for the first time since the wagon had deposited her in this foreign place, Evelyn thought maybe, just maybe, she might actually survive here. Not as the bride nobody wanted, but as herself, whoever that turned out to be. The morning after the storm, Evelyn woke to find her hands so stiff she could barely make a fist. The bandages Mason had wrapped the night before were spotted with dried blood, and every finger throbbed in time with her heartbeat. She forced herself out of bed anyway. Pain meant she was alive, and alive meant she had work to do. Downstairs, May took one look at her hands and shook her head. "You're not doing dishes today, or much else that requires fingers." "I can manage." "Wasn't a question, girl. Sit." May pushed a cup of coffee into Evelyn's bandaged hands. "Drink that. Then you're going to help me with inventory. Just counting and writing. Think those college-educated fingers can handle that?" Evelyn managed a small smile. "I'll try not to strain myself." The ranch was a mess from the storm. Half the chicken coop had collapsed. Sections of fence lay scattered across the pastures like broken bones. A storage shed had lost its entire roof, leaving sacks of grain exposed to whatever moisture the wind had carried. Mason and the hands were already out surveying the damage when Evelyn carried her coffee onto the porch. She could see him in the distance, walking the fence line with Tom, pointing at various disasters and making what looked like calculations in his head. "Gonna take us 2 weeks to fix all this," Tom's voice carried on the morning air as they walked closer. "Maybe 3 if we hit more weather." "We don't have 3 weeks," Mason replied. "Crow's not going to wait for us to recover. He'll see this as an opportunity." "You really think he'd hit us while we're down?" Mason's laugh was bitter. "I think he'd hit us especially because we're down. That's how men like Victor Crow operate. They don't fight fair because they don't have to." They'd reached the porch now, close enough for Evelyn to see the exhaustion carved into Mason's face. He'd probably been up since before dawn, cataloging every broken thing on his property and calculating what it would cost to fix. "Miss Mercer," he said, noticing her. "How are the hands?" "Sore, but functional." "Good. Because I need you to do something today." She straightened. "What?" "Ride into Coldwater Springs with Tom. We need supplies. Nails, wire, lumber. May's got a list of kitchen needs too. Think you can handle that?" It was the first time he'd asked her to do something off the ranch, something that required trust. "Yes," she said. "I can handle it. Tom will drive the wagon. You just need to help load and make sure the merchants don't try to cheat us on the count. They see a woman and they assume she can't do math." He pulled a roll of bills from his pocket. "This should cover it. Get receipts for everything." Evelyn took the money, aware of how much he was putting in her hands. This wasn't just errands. This was responsibility. An hour later, she was sitting next to Tom on the wagon bench, bouncing along the rutted road toward Coldwater Springs. The town was 15 miles from the ranch, and Tom said they'd be lucky to make it in 3 hours given the condition of the road after the storm. "You nervous?" Tom asked after they'd been riding in silence for a while. "Should I be? Town folks aren't exactly friendly to Blackridge people right now. Crow's been spreading stories about Mason. Says he's unstable, dangerous, that he drove his first wife to an early grave." Evelyn turned to look at him. "What happened to her?" "His first wife." Tom was quiet for a long moment. "Fever took her. Came on fast, killed her in 3 days. Nothing anybody could do. But Crow started rumors that Mason worked her to death, that he cared more about his ranch than his own wife. Load of horseshit, pardon my language, but people believe what they want to believe." "And what do you believe?" "I believe I've worked for Mason Blackridge for 7 years, and in that time I've seen him treat his animals better than most men treat their children. I've seen him give his own food to ranch hands when supplies ran low. I've seen him ride through a blizzard to bring a doctor to a worker's sick kid." Tom glanced at her. "He's hard, but he's not cruel. There's a difference." The road wound through increasingly barren landscape. Red rock formations jutted up like broken teeth. Scrub brush clung to life in impossible places. In the distance, Evelyn could see mountains, their peaks still dusted with snow despite the heat of the valley. "This land," she said softly. "It's beautiful and terrible at the same time. That's the frontier for you. Doesn't give a damn about your feelings either way." Coldwater Springs appeared on the horizon around midday. A collection of wooden buildings clustered around a main street like wagons circled against attack. It wasn't much, but compared to the endless emptiness they'd been traveling through, it felt almost cosmopolitan. Tom guided the wagon to the general store, a 2-story building with peeling paint and windows clouded with dust. A few men loitered outside, and their conversation stopped when they saw the Blackridge wagon pull up. "Trouble?" Evelyn whispered. "Always is. Just ignore them." Inside, the store smelled like sawdust and tobacco and old coffee. A thin man with wire-rimmed glasses stood behind the counter, and his expression soured when he saw them. "Tom," he said flatly. "Didn't expect Blackridge business today." "Got a list, Mr. Hendricks. We'll need it filled soon as possible." Tom handed over May's carefully written inventory. Hendricks looked it over, his frown deepening. "This is a lot of material, going to take time to gather it all." "We've got time," Tom replied evenly. "Also going to cost extra. Prices have gone up since the storm. Supply and demand, you understand." "Prices went up in 3 days?" Evelyn spoke before she could stop herself. "That seems remarkably convenient." Hendricks turned his attention to her for the first time. "And who might you be?" "Evelyn Mercer. I'm helping with the Blackridge accounts." "Mercer?" He said his name like he was tasting something unpleasant. "You that girl they sent instead of the pretty one?" The casual cruelty of it struck like a slap. Evelyn felt her face heat, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm the one who's here to make sure we're charged fair prices for goods, yes. Fair prices are whatever I say they are. Don't like it, take your business elsewhere." "We both know there is nowhere else within a day's ride," Evelyn said quietly. "Which is exactly why you feel comfortable gouging your customers." Hendricks leaned forward, his expression turning ugly. "You've got a smart mouth for someone who just arrived. Maybe nobody told you how things work around here. Victor Crow owns half the businesses in this town. The other half know better than to cross him. And Victor Crow has made it very clear that anyone doing business with Mason Blackridge better charge accordingly." "So this isn't about supply and demand at all," Evelyn said. "It's extortion. Call it what you want, but if you want these supplies, you'll pay my price." Tom touched her elbow gently, a warning. But Evelyn was tired of being warned, tired of being dismissed, tired of cruel men using their power to hurt people who couldn't fight back. "What was your price before the storm?" she asked. "Don't see how that's—" "Humor me." Hendricks named a figure. Evelyn did the math in her head, comparing it to the inflated price he'd just quoted. "You're trying to charge us 40% more than you were 3 days ago, for the same goods, from the same suppliers." She pulled out the roll of bills Mason had given her. "I'll pay you 10% over your pre-storm price. That's more than fair given the inconvenience of gathering the order. 40 or nothing." Then nothing. Evelyn tucked the money back into her pocket. Tom, we're leaving. Now hold on, Hendrik sputtered. No, you hold on. Evelyn turned back to face him. You think we're desperate. You think Mason Blackridge is on his knees and you can kick him while he's down. Maybe that's true. Maybe we are desperate. But we're not stupid, and we're not paying robbery prices to a man who smiles while he picks our pockets. You'll regret this, Hendrik said, his face flushing red. Crow's going to hear about this, and when he does, you can tell him Evelyn Mercer said he can go straight to hell. She walked out before he could respond, Tom hurrying after her. Outside, the loitering men had multiplied. Word had apparently spread that there was entertainment to be had. That's her, one of them said loudly. The replacement bride. Heard Blackridge took one look and tried to send her back. Laughter rippled through the group. Tom's hand moved toward his belt, where a pistol rested in its holster. Don't, Evelyn said quietly. They want a reaction. Don't give them one. They're insulting you. They're insulting themselves. Men who need to mock women to feel important are already admitting they have nothing else to offer. She climbed onto the wagon bench with as much dignity as she could manage, very aware of all the eyes watching her. Tom took his place beside her and snapped the reins. That went well, he muttered as they rolled out of town. Did it? You told the most powerful man in the valley to go to hell, through his pet shopkeeper, in front of witnesses. Tom shook his head, but he was almost smiling. Mason's either going to fire you or promote you. Haven't decided which. We didn't get the supplies. No, but you didn't let them rob us blind either. That counts for something. The ride back was longer than the ride out, or at least it felt that way. Evelyn's hands had started bleeding again through the bandages, and her whole body ached from the tension of the confrontation. You know what you did back there is going to have consequences, Tom said after a long silence. I know. Crow doesn't like being challenged, especially not by women, especially not in public. What's he going to do? Things are already as bad as they can get. Tom gave her a long look. You really believe that? No, Evelyn admitted. But I'm tired of being afraid. The sun was setting by the time they reached Black Ridge Ranch. Mason was waiting on the porch, and Evelyn could tell from his posture that he'd already heard. Inside, he said simply. Both of you. In his office, a sparse room with a desk, 2 chairs, and walls covered in maps and cattle records, Mason stood with his arms crossed, looking like a judge about to deliver a sentence. You want to tell me what happened in town? Tom started to speak, but Mason held up a hand. Not you. Her. Evelyn explained the encounter as precisely as she could, leaving out her emotions and sticking to facts. Mason listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, silence filled the room. You told Victor Crow to go to hell, Mason said finally. Technically, I told his shopkeeper that he could tell Crow. I know what you said. Mason ran a hand through his hair, and Evelyn couldn't tell if he was angry or something else. Do you have any idea what you've done? I refuse to be robbed. You declared war! The words came out sharp, frustrated. Crow was content to squeeze us slowly, make things difficult, but not impossible. Now you've embarrassed him in front of his own people. He can't let that stand. He has to respond. And when Victor Crow responds, people get hurt. So what was I supposed to do? Pay 40% more than the goods were worth? Let him think he can charge us anything because we have nowhere else to go. Yes! Mason slammed his hand on the desk. Yes, that's exactly what you were supposed to do, because sometimes surviving means swallowing your pride and paying the toll. That's not surviving, Evelyn shot back, her own temper finally breaking loose. That's dying slowly. If we pay his prices today, tomorrow they'll be 50% higher, then 60. Then he'll own us completely, and you know it. Better to be owned than buried, is it? Because from where I'm standing, you're already buried. You're just too proud to admit it. The silence that followed was absolute. Tom had gone very still in his chair, probably wishing he was anywhere else. Mason's voice when he spoke again was dangerously quiet. Get out. Mason, Tom started. Not you. Her. Get out of my office. Out of my sight. Evelyn left, her hands shaking with anger and adrenaline. She made it to her room and closed the door before the tears came. Not sad tears, but furious ones. Tears of frustration at a man too stubborn to see he was already losing. Tears of rage at a world where speaking truth was treated like a crime. She paced the small room like a caged animal, replaying the conversation, thinking of all the things she should have said differently. Better, smarter. But underneath the anger was something else. Fear. Because Tom was right. Crow would respond. And when he did, people would suffer because of her pride. A knock on her door interrupted her spiral. "It's May. Let me in." Evelyn opened the door to find the older woman carrying a tray with bread, cheese, and tea. "Heard you and the boss had words," May said, setting the tray on the small table. "Whole ranch heard, actually. You've got a set of lungs on you." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Don't apologize to me. I've been waiting years for someone to tell Mason Blackridge he's being a fool. Glad it finally happened." May poured tea into a chipped cup. "Drink. Look like you're about to shake apart." Evelyn took the cup gratefully. "He's going to send me away." "Maybe. Probably not, though." "How can you be so sure?" May settled into the room's only chair with a sigh. "Because you're the first person in 3 years who's treated this ranch like it's worth fighting for. Mason's so busy trying to keep his head above water, he's forgotten there's such a thing as winning. You reminded him. He doesn't like it, but he needed it. I made things worse. You made things different. Worse comes later, sure, but different is what we needed." May studied her with sharp eyes. "You love him yet?" The question was so unexpected that Evelyn nearly dropped her tea. "What? No, I barely know him. He barely tolerates me. We're not— Wasn't actually asking if you love him right now, was asking if you're going to." May smiled slightly. "Because that's how these things usually go. Woman shows up, man's an ass, they fight like cats in a bag, then one day they realize they'd die for each other. Tale as old as time. That's not going to happen." "If you say so." May pushed herself up with a grunt. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be worse than today. They usually are." She left, and Evelyn sat alone with her cooling tea and her tangled thoughts. May was wrong. She had to be. Evelyn didn't love Mason Blackridge. Couldn't love him. He was hard and cold and treated her like an inconvenience at best. The fact that he occasionally showed glimpses of something else, something almost human, didn't change the fundamental truth that he'd never wanted her here. And yet she'd stood in that store and defended his ranch like it was her own. Had told one of the most powerful men in the valley to go to hell on Mason's behalf. Had come back here knowing she'd made things harder, knowing there would be consequences, and somewhere deep down not regretting it at all. She finished her tea and tried to sleep, but rest wouldn't come. Every sound outside felt amplified. Every creak of the house settling felt like a threat. By the time dawn crept through her window, she'd maybe slept an hour total. Downstairs, breakfast was a tense affair. Mason didn't speak to her, didn't look at her. The ranch hands picked up on the atmosphere and kept their heads down, shoveling food and escaping as quickly as possible. Evelyn helped May clean up in silence. "He'll come around," May said quietly. "Just needs time to stop being stubborn." "How much time?" "With Mason? Could be days, could be years." May handed her a dish to dry. "Man's got layers of stubborn that go all the way down to bedrock." The day crawled by. Evelyn did her assigned tasks, feeding chickens, hauling water, helping May prepare lunch, but her mind was elsewhere, watching for riders on the horizon, waiting for whatever response Crow would send. It came 3 days later. Evelyn was in the chicken coop, collecting eggs and trying not to get pecked, when she heard shouting from the yard. She emerged to find 2 riders approaching fast, pushing their horses hard. The ranch hands materialized from various buildings, hands near weapons. Mason stepped out of the barn, his expression grim. The riders slowed as they reached the yard. Both men wore Crow's brand on their vests, a crown symbol that looked pretentious and threatening in equal measure. "Mason Blackridge," the lead rider said. He was older, weathered, with a scar that pulled his mouth into a permanent sneer. "Got a message from Mr. Crow." "I'm listening." "He's calling in your debt, full amount, due in 2 weeks." The words landed like a physical blow. Evelyn saw Mason's jaw tighten, saw his hands curl into fists. "What debt?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "The loan you took out last year to expand your herd. Terms clearly state Mr. Crow can call it due with 2 weeks' notice." The rider smiled, showing yellow teeth. "Consider this your notice." That loan isn't due for another 18 months. Was. Terms changed. Legal and binding. You don't pay, we take the ranch to cover the debt. He pulled a document from his saddlebag and tossed it to the ground. It's all there. Signed by you. Witnessed by a lawyer. 2 weeks, Blackridge. Find the money or find somewhere else to live. They wheeled their horses and rode off before anyone could respond, leaving the paper lying in the dirt like a declaration of war. Mason picked it up, his face unreadable. Tom came to stand beside him. How much? Tom asked quietly. More than we have, more than we can raise in 2 weeks. Mason's voice was flat, empty. He's got us. The ranch hands exchanged worried looks. Jobs disappeared when ranches failed. Families starved. Everyone knew what this meant. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. This was her fault. Her pride, her refusal to back down, had accelerated whatever timeline Crow had been working on. I'm sorry, she said, stepping forward. This is because of what I said in town. I'll go to Crow myself. I'll apologize. You'll do nothing, Mason cut her off. This isn't about you. Crow's been planning this for months. You just gave him an excuse to move faster. He looked at the paper again, then crumpled it in his fist. Everyone back to work. We've still got 2 weeks. Maybe something will. He didn't finish the sentence. They all knew nothing would turn up. Money didn't appear from nowhere, and everyone in the valley who might lend to them was already under Crow's thumb. That night, Evelyn couldn't eat, couldn't sit still. She kept thinking about her father's money, sitting in some Boston bank account. Worthless to her here, but enough to save the ranch. If she could somehow get word to him, convince him to send it. But her father wouldn't. She knew that with absolute certainty. He'd laugh at the idea of sending money to save a ranch owned by a man he'd deliberately cheated. Would probably consider it poetic justice that his unwanted daughter's new home was being destroyed. She was still awake at midnight, staring at her ceiling when she heard voices downstairs. Male voices, tense and urgent. Evelyn crept to her door and opened it just enough to listen. Other choice. That was Tom. If we pool everything the hands have saved, add what's in the ranch account, we're still short by half. I'm not taking the men's savings. Mason's voice was firm. They've earned that money. They have families, plans. I won't. We don't have families if the ranch fails, another voice interrupted. She thought it might be Jake. We're with you, boss, all of us. You've been fair to us. Time we return the favor. It's not enough anyway, Mason said. Even with everyone's savings, we'd still be short. And I won't let you all go broke for a lost cause. So what then? Tom demanded. We just give up? Let Crow win? I don't see another option. Then you're not looking hard enough. Silence. Then Mason's voice, quieter. What am I supposed to do, Tom? Rob a bank? The money doesn't exist. Maybe it does. Maybe we're just thinking too small. What does that mean? It means I heard things about why Crow really wants this ranch. He wants it because I won't bow to him. That's part of it. But I heard there's something else. Something about water rights that date back to before the valley was settled. Old Spanish grants or something. And Blackridge Ranch is sitting right on top of them. Evelyn heard the sound of a chair scraping. Where did you hear this? Mason's voice had changed, taken on an edge of interest. Can't say. But the source was solid. Said if you could prove those old rights still hold, you'd control water access for half the valley, including parts of Crow's land. If that were true, why wouldn't Crow have already seized those rights? Because he needs to own the ranch first. Can't claim historical water rights if he doesn't own the land they're attached to. But once he does, he controls everything, Mason finished. Every ranch in the valley would be dependent on him for water. He wouldn't just own Red Hollow, he'd be king of it. More silence. Evelyn could almost hear Mason thinking. Where would these grants be recorded? He asked finally. County Records Office, in the capital, 3 days hard ride from here. And you think they'd just let me walk in and look at 100-year-old Spanish land grants? I think if you don't try, you'll never know. And I think 2 weeks gives you just enough time to ride there, search the records, and ride back. Assuming the rights exist and assuming you can prove them. That's a lot of assuming. It's more hope than we had 5 minutes ago. Evelyn heard Mason pace, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. If I leave, Crow might make a move on the ranch. Then we defend it. We've got enough men and enough bullets. And we've got... Tom paused. We've got Miss Mercer. What?
She's smart, smarter than you want to admit, and she's got something to prove. Leave her in charge of the house and supplies. I'll handle the men and defense. Between us, we can hold things together for a week. You want me to leave my ranch in the hands of a woman who's been here less than 2 months?
I want you to leave your ranch in the hands of someone who told Victor Crow to go to hell and meant it. The conversation ended there, but Evelyn stayed frozen at her door for a long time after the men dispersed to their beds. Her heart was hammering, her mind racing. Mason was going to leave, was going to ride for the capital and gamble everything on historical water rights that might not exist. And Tom wanted her to help hold the ranch together while he was gone. She should be terrified, should be convinced this was insane. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Useful. The next morning, Mason called everyone together in the yard. The sun was just clearing the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and red. "I'm leaving today," he announced without preamble. "Going to the capital to search county records for documentation that might save this ranch. Tom's in charge of defense and daily operations while I'm gone. Miss Mercer will manage the house and supplies." The announcement was met with stunned silence. One of the younger hands raised his hand tentatively. "Sir, you're leaving? Now? With Crow threatening to take the ranch?" "I'm leaving because Crow's threatening to take the ranch. This is our only chance." Mason's gaze swept across the assembled men. "I need to know if I can count on you, all of you, to hold this place together while I'm gone, to follow Tom's orders, to defend this land if it comes to that." "You can count on us," Tom said immediately. The others nodded, murmured agreement. Even the youngest hands, the ones who'd probably never been in a real fight, stood a little straighter. Mason's eyes found Evelyn in the crowd. "Miss Mercer." A word. She followed him into the barn, away from listening ears. Inside, his black stallion was already saddled, saddlebags packed. "I don't know if I'm making the right choice," he said quietly. "Leaving the ranch, trusting this plan, any of it. Then why are you doing it?" "Because the wrong choice is better than no choice at all." He adjusted the stallion's bridle with practiced hands. "Tom thinks you can handle managing things. I'm not convinced, but I'm also out of options and out of time, so here we are. I won't let you down. You can't promise that. You don't know what's coming." He turned to face her fully. "Crow's men might show up. They might try to intimidate you, might try worse. If things get dangerous, I need you to run. Don't try to be a hero. Just get somewhere safe and wait for me to come back." "And if you don't come back?" The question hung between them. "Then you were right," Mason said finally. "We were already dying slowly. At least this way we died fighting." He led the stallion out into the morning light and mounted in one smooth motion. The animal danced sideways, sensing the tension, but Mason controlled it easily. "Tom knows what to do," he called down. "Listen to him. Don't take unnecessary risks. And for the love of everything, don't provoke Victor Crow any more than you already have." "No promises," Evelyn said, and was rewarded with something that might have been almost a smile. Stubborn woman, stubborn man. He rode out without another word, pushing the stallion into a ground-eating gallop that carried him toward the eastern horizon. Evelyn watched until he was just a dark speck against the red landscape, then nothing at all. "Well," Tom said, coming to stand beside her, "now the real work begins." He wasn't wrong. The first day without Mason felt like walking a tightrope. Every decision Evelyn made felt too big, too important. When May asked whether to butcher one of the older chickens or save it for another month, Evelyn agonized for 10 minutes before choosing. When a ranch hand asked permission to ride into town for personal business, she spent 20 minutes weighing the risks. "You're thinking too hard," Tom told her at dinner. "Trust your gut. You've got good instincts." "My instincts told me to insult the most powerful man in the valley. And you were right to. That's what I mean." He passed her the beans. "Stop second-guessing yourself. The men are watching. They need to see confidence, even if you have to fake it." So Evelyn faked it. She walked through the ranch with her shoulders back and her chin up. Made decisions quickly and stuck to them. Listened when people spoke and didn't apologize for not knowing things. And slowly, incrementally, the ranch hands stopped looking at her like a temporary problem and started treating her like someone who belonged. The second day brought a test. A fence broke in the south pasture, and 36 cattle wandered through before anyone noticed. By the time Tom and the hands rounded them up, 2 were missing, either lost in the scrub or already stolen. "Your call," Tom said when they reported back. Do we spend tomorrow searching for 2 head, or do we focus on securing the rest of the herd? Evelyn thought about it. 2 cattle meant money. But a full day of searching meant work not getting done elsewhere, meant men exposed and vulnerable if Crow decided to make a move. Secure the herd, she decided. Losing 2 is bad. Losing 2 dozen would be catastrophic. Tom nodded approval and rode off to organize the work. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep again. She kept wondering if she'd made the right choice, if those 2 lost cattle would be the difference between surviving and failing. She was still awake when she heard the horses. Multiple riders, moving fast, approaching from the west. Evelyn was at her window in seconds, straining to see in the darkness. Tom was already in the yard, rifle in hand. The other men emerged from the bunkhouse, armed and ready. The riders slowed as they entered the ranch proper. 6 men, all wearing Crow's crown brand. The same scarred man who delivered the debt notice sat at the head of the group. "Where's Blackridge?" he called. "Not here," Tom replied calmly. "What do you want?" Mr. Crow heard about his sudden departure. Wants to make sure the ranch is being properly maintained in his absence, seeing as it'll be his property soon enough. "Ranch is fine. You can report back that everything's under control. I think we'll see for ourselves." The scarred man started to dismount. "I don't think you will." Tom's voice hardened. "This is private property. You're not welcome here. 2 weeks from now, it won't be private anymore. We're just getting a head start on the inventory." Tom raised his rifle. Around the yard, the other Blackridge men did the same. "Turn around and ride back to whatever hole you crawled out of. This is your only warning." For a long moment, nobody moved. 6 men against 8. The odds weren't impossible, and everyone knew it. The scarred man calculated, his hand resting on his pistol. Then Evelyn did something insane. She opened her window and called down, "You're trespassing. Leave now or we'll defend our property. Your choice." Every eye turned up toward her window. The scarred man's expression twisted into something ugly. "The replacement bride. Should have known you'd still be here. Tell me, does Blackridge know he left his ranch in the hands of a woman nobody wanted?" "He left it in the hands of people who aren't afraid of you," Evelyn replied, "which is more than Victor Crow can say about most of this valley." The scarred man's horse shifted, sensing the tension. Brave words from a safe window. "Then come test them, see what happens." For a heartbeat, she thought he would. Thought violence would erupt right there in the yard and everything would spiral into blood and chaos. Instead, the scarred man smiled. 2 weeks, he said. "Then we'll see how brave you are when you're being thrown off this land with nothing but the clothes you're wearing." He wheeled his horse and led his men back into the darkness. The sound of hoofbeats faded slowly, like a threat dissolving but not disappearing. Tom lowered his rifle and looked up at her window. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen." "Can it be both?" Evelyn called back. He laughed. Actual laughter, sharp and surprised. "Get some sleep, Miss Mercer. I have a feeling tomorrow's going to be interesting." Evelyn closed her window and sat on her bed, her hands shaking with delayed fear. She'd just stared down 6 armed men and lived to tell about it. Mason was going to kill her when he found out, if he ever came back. That thought kept her awake until dawn. The days crawled by like wounded animals. Mason had been gone 4 days, and every sunrise brought new tension that settled over the ranch like fog. Evelyn found herself checking the eastern horizon constantly, looking for dust clouds that might signal riders approaching. Though whether she was hoping for Mason's return or dreading Crow's next move, she couldn't say. The work didn't stop for anxiety. If anything, it intensified. Tom pushed the men harder, rotating guard shifts so someone was always watching the approaches to the ranch. May tripled her usual cooking output, preparing food that could be eaten quickly if trouble came. And Evelyn learned to sleep in her clothes with her boots nearby, ready to move at the first sign of danger. On the 5th morning, she was in the barn, helping one of the younger hands repair tack, when she heard May calling from the house. "Evelyn, you need to see this." The urgency in May's voice sent ice through her veins. Evelyn dropped the leather straps she'd been working on and ran toward the house, her mind already cycling through disasters. Raiders. Fire. Someone hurt. What she found was somehow worse. May stood in the kitchen holding a cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. The kind of envelope that came from lawyers or bankers or people who had the power to destroy lives with paperwork. "This just came." May said. Ryder brought it. Wouldn't say who sent it, just handed it over and left. Evelyn took the envelope with hands that wanted to shake. Her name was written across the front in elegant script that she recognized immediately. Celeste, you going to open it or just stare at it? May asked. Evelyn broke the seal and pulled out a single sheet of expensive stationery. The message was brief. Dearest sister, I hope this letter finds you well, though I confess I have my doubts given the circumstances of your current situation. Father showed me the most interesting correspondence yesterday, a letter from Mr. Victor Crow detailing the unfortunate financial difficulties facing Blackridge Ranch. It seems your husband is about to lose everything. I wanted to write and offer my assistance. I'm prepared to travel to Red Hollow Valley immediately to discuss certain arrangements that might prove beneficial to all parties involved. After all, Mr. Crow mentioned that he's quite eager to meet the woman who was originally promised to Mr. Blackridge, the woman who might still be able to salvage something from this disaster. I'll arrive within the week. Do try to make yourself presentable for my visit. I know the frontier is rough, but there's no excuse for letting oneself go completely. With sisterly affection, Celeste Evelyn read it twice, her stomach twisting tighter with each word. May peered over her shoulder. Well, the older woman said finally, that's some weapons-grade horse manure right there. She's coming here. Evelyn's voice came out flat. She's actually coming here. Looks like. Question is why? What does she think she can do? But Evelyn knew. She'd seen this pattern her whole life. Celeste only appeared when there was something to gain. Attention, admiration, advantage. And if Crow had reached out to her father, if he'd mentioned the original bride. She thinks she can trade herself for the ranch, Evelyn said quietly. Thinks Crow will call off the debt if she offers to marry Mason instead of me. May snorted. Mason's not going to agree to that. Man might be stubborn as a mule, but he's not stupid. Mason's not here, and when Celeste wants something, she's very good at making men believe they want it too. Evelyn crumpled the letter in her fist. I need to tell Tom. She found him near the north pasture, overseeing fence repairs. When she explained the situation, his expression darkened. When's she arriving? Within the week, she said. Could be tomorrow. Could be 6 days from now. Tom swore under his breath. Mason's not back yet. Won't be for at least 3 more days if everything goes perfect. And nothing ever goes perfect. What do we do? We? Tom looked at her directly. We don't do anything. You tell your sister she's not welcome here and send her back where she came from. You think it's that simple? You think Celeste will just accept no and leave quietly? Don't care if she accepts it or not. This is Blackridge land, and you're the one Mason left in charge of the house. That means you get to decide who's welcome and who's not. He pulled off his work gloves and slapped them against his thigh. Your sister sounds like trouble we don't need right now. She is trouble. She's always been trouble. But she's also beautiful and charming and very good at making people believe she's the solution to all their problems. Then you better be ready to fight for what's yours. The words hung in the air between them. What's yours? As if this ranch, this life, this place actually belonged to her. As if she had any real claim to it beyond being the unwanted substitute who'd happened to survive longer than anyone expected. But standing there in the hot sun with dust coating her skin and her hands rough from work, Evelyn realized something. She didn't want to lose this. Didn't want to go back to being the invisible daughter in a Boston mansion. Didn't want to surrender to Celeste again, to watch her sister take what should have been hers simply because Celeste was prettier and knew how to smile. I'll handle it, she said. You sure? No, but I'll do it anyway. Tom nodded slowly. That's all anyone can ask. The next 2 days passed in a haze of preparation and dread. Evelyn threw herself into work with almost manic intensity, as if being useful enough would somehow armor her against whatever Celeste was planning. She learned to shoot. Tom spent an afternoon teaching her to handle a rifle, and while she wasn't accurate, at least she could hit a target-sized object at 20 yards. She memorized the ranch's supply inventory down to the last nail and sack of flour. She rode the fence lines with the hands and learned to spot weak points before they became breaks. And every evening she stood on the porch watching the western road, waiting for the dust cloud that would announce her sister's arrival. It came on the 7th day. 3 wagons rolled toward the ranch in mid-afternoon, expensive and ridiculously impractical for frontier roads. Evelyn watched them approach with her heart hammering against her ribs, May standing solid beside her. "You want me to get the rifle?" May asked quietly. "Probably wouldn't help." "Make me feel better."
"Then get it." May disappeared inside and returned with the Winchester, which she held loosely at her side. Not threatening, just present. The message was clear enough.
The wagon stopped in front of the house, and Celeste emerged from the first one like a queen stepping onto foreign soil. She wore a traveling dress that probably cost more than the entire ranch earned in a month, her hair perfectly arranged despite the long journey, her face shaded by a parasol that one of her servants rushed to hold over her. Because of course she'd brought servants. "Evelyn!" Celeste's voice carried perfectly across the yard, musical and warm. "My dear sister, how wonderful to see you again." She glided forward with practiced grace, and Evelyn found herself pulled into an embrace that smelled like French perfume and felt like a snake coiling around its prey. "You look—" Celeste pulled back, her eyes traveling over Evelyn's work-worn appearance with barely concealed disdain. "Well, you look like you've been working hard. How admirable. What are you doing here, Celeste? Is that any way to greet your sister? I've come all this way to help you. The least you could do is offer me some refreshment and a place to clean up from the journey." She looked past Evelyn at the house. "This is where you've been living? It's rather rustic, isn't it? It's a working ranch, not a manor house." "Yes, I can see that." Celeste snapped her fingers and her servants began unloading trunks from the wagons. "Where should we put my things? I assume there's a guest room?" May stepped forward, still holding the rifle. "There's the small room upstairs, same one Miss Evelyn had when she first arrived. It's available." Celeste's perfect composure slipped just slightly. "Small room? Surely there's something more suitable for a guest of my standing." "That's what we got," May said flatly. "Take it, or sleep in your wagon." For a moment, genuine anger flashed across Celeste's beautiful face. Then she smiled, and the anger disappeared like it had never existed. "Well, when in Rome, I suppose. Please have my things taken up, and I'll need hot water for a bath immediately." "We don't have a bath," Evelyn said. "There's a basin in your room. You can heat water on the stove if you want it warm." Celeste stared at her like she'd suggested bathing in a cow trough. "You're joking!" "Do I look like I'm joking?" The sisters faced each other, and Evelyn saw calculations running behind Celeste's eyes, saw her sister weighing how much discomfort she was willing to endure for whatever goal had brought her here. "Fine," Celeste said finally. "I'll make do. I'm nothing if not adaptable." She swept into the house, trailing servants and expensive luggage, leaving Evelyn and May standing in the yard. "I want to shoot something," May muttered. "Get in line." Inside, Celeste had already taken command of the kitchen, directing her servants to rearrange things and complaining loudly about the primitive conditions. May's expression suggested she was reconsidering the no-shooting policy. "Out," May said firmly. "This is my kitchen. You want something, you ask me. You don't touch my stove, you don't move my supplies, and you sure as hell don't tell me how to run things." "I was merely trying to Don't care. Out." Celeste opened her mouth to argue, caught the look in May's eyes, and wisely retreated. She found Evelyn in the main room and arranged herself on the least comfortable chair like it was a throne. "We need to talk," she announced. "Privately." Evelyn led her outside, far enough from the house that servants and ranch hands couldn't overhear. Celeste waited until they were alone, then dropped the pleasant facade like a discarded coat. "I'm going to save you," she said without preamble. "I don't need saving." "Don't be ridiculous. Father told me everything. The debt, Crow's ultimatum. Mason Blackridge desperately searching for some miracle that won't materialize. This ranch is finished, Evelyn. Accept it. Mason will find the water rights documentation. He'll fail." Celeste's voice was matter-of-fact. "And even if he doesn't, do you really think some dusty old papers will stop a man like Victor Crow? He owns judges, lawyers, half the territorial government. He'll tie those rights up in courts for years while you starve." "Then what are you proposing?" Celeste smiled. "I've spoken with Mr. Crow. He's a reasonable man, a powerful man, and he's willing to forgive the debt entirely if certain conditions are met. Let me guess. Those conditions involve you. They involve correcting a mistake. Father should have sent me in the first place. Mr. Blackridge was promised a suitable wife, someone who could be an asset to him, someone who understands society and politics, and how to navigate the world of powerful men. She gestured at Evelyn dismissively. No offense, sister, but you were never qualified for that role. Mason doesn't want you. He never did. Mason Blackridge is about to lose everything. Men in desperate situations are remarkably flexible about what they want. Celeste's expression softened into something that might have looked like sympathy if Evelyn didn't know better. I'm offering you an escape. You can go back to Boston with me. Father's even agreed to let you stay in the house, as long as you're quiet and don't embarrass him. It's more than you deserve, really. The casual cruelty of it landed like a physical blow. More than you deserve, as if existing was something Evelyn needed to earn permission for. No, Evelyn said quietly. No? No. I'm not leaving. I'm not letting you waltz in here and take what's mine. And I'm certainly not crawling back to Father's house to live as a ghost in the attic. Celeste's laugh was like breaking glass. What's yours, Evelyn? You've been here, 2 months? You think that gives you ownership? You think these people actually care about you? She leaned closer. They tolerate you because you're free labor. The moment Mason gets back, if he gets back, he'll jump at the chance to trade you for me and save his precious ranch. Because that's what men do. They choose winners, and you've never been a winner. Get off my land.
Your land? Celeste's eyebrows rose. You really have deluded yourself, haven't you? This isn't your land. This isn't your ranch. These aren't your people. You're just the placeholder who happened to be here when the real option arrived. Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest. Not break. Crack. Like ice under pressure, right before it shatters completely.
I'm going to give you one chance, she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside. Take your servants, take your wagons, and leave. Right now, before this gets worse. Worse for whom? You can't throw me out. I'm family. You stopped being family the moment you stood at that window and watched Father send me away without saying a word, without even pretending to care. For just a second, something that might have been guilt flickered across Celeste's face. Then it vanished. I'll stay as long as I please, she said, and when Mason returns, we'll see who he chooses. The sister who can save his ranch, or the sister who's done nothing but make his life harder. She walked away before Evelyn could respond, her expensive dress swishing against the dirt like a silk flag of conquest. May found Evelyn an hour later, sitting on a fence rail and staring at nothing. She's taking over the small room like she owns it, May reported. Got her servants running around demanding this and that. One of them asked me if we had any champagne. She snorted. Champagne! On a working ranch in Red Hollow Valley. Maybe I should leave, Evelyn said quietly. Maybe she's right. Maybe this was never mine to fight for. May was quiet for a long moment. Then she climbed up onto the fence rail beside Evelyn with a grunt of effort. You know what I see when I look at you? May asked. Someone out of place? I see someone who learned to shoot in 3 days. Someone who stared down 6 armed men from a bedroom window. Someone who gets up before dawn to feed chickens, even though chickens are mean little dinosaurs who deserve extinction. May bumped Evelyn's shoulder with her own. I see someone who belongs here, whether you believe it yet or not. Celeste is everything I'm not. Beautiful, charming, good with people. Celeste is a parasite in a pretty dress. She's never worked for anything in her life, never fought for anything. You really think Mason's going to choose that over someone who's proven she'll bleed for this ranch? If it saves everything he's built? Yes. I think he'd choose that in a heartbeat. May sighed. You're probably right. Men are stupid like that. But you know what? That's his mistake to make, not yours. You don't make it easier for him by running away. Down in the yard, Celeste emerged from the house looking miraculously refreshed, as if the frontier had simply chosen to spare her from its usual roughness. She saw them watching and waved, all pleasant smiles again. She's going to try to turn the ranch hands against me, Evelyn said. Let her try. Most of these men have been here long enough to smell horse shit when it's wearing perfume. But May was wrong. By dinner that evening, Celeste had already started working her magic. She appeared in the dining room looking stunning in a dress that was somehow both appropriate for frontier dining and impossibly elegant. She complimented May's cooking with exactly the right amount of sincerity. She asked the ranch hands about their work with what seemed like genuine interest. She laughed at their jokes and remembered their names and generally behaved like the perfect version of what a rancher's wife should be. Evelyn watched it happen and felt sick. This was what Celeste did. This was her gift. She could walk into any room and make everyone in it feel like they were the most important person she'd ever met. It was a skill Evelyn had never mastered, had never even tried to learn because it felt like lying. But watching it work, watching the ranch hands who'd barely tolerated her start to warm to Celeste after one meal, she wondered if maybe lying was the more valuable skill after all. "Your sister's very charming," Tom said quietly as they cleared plates after dinner. "Yes, she is." "Doesn't mean anything, though." "Doesn't it?" Tom glanced at where Celeste was holding court, describing her journey from Boston with theatrical flair while the men hung on every word. "Charm's easy, loyalty's hard. These men know the difference." "Do they?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. That night, Evelyn lay in her bed. They'd moved her to an even smaller room to accommodate Celeste's takeover of the previous one, and stared at the ceiling. She could hear Celeste moving around next door, humming something cheerful. Could hear the ranch hands in the bunkhouse, their voices carrying through the window, probably still talking about the beautiful visitor who'd graced them with her presence. 7 days until Crow's deadline. 3 days minimum until Mason returned, assuming everything went perfectly. And now Celeste here, poisoning everything with her perfect smile and her perfect manners and her perfect ability to make Evelyn feel like the inferior copy of something better. Sleep didn't come easy. The next morning brought fresh disasters. 2 more sections of fence had broken overnight, probably from age and weather, but the timing was suspicious. The well pump on the east side finally gave up completely, meaning water would have to be hauled from the creek until it could be fixed. And one of the horses came up lame with no obvious cause, cutting their available mounts when they could least afford to lose one. Evelyn was dealing with the fence situation when she saw riders approaching from the west. 4 men, moving casual but purposeful. Not Crow's people, these wore no brand, carried themselves different. They pulled up near the barn and asked for whoever was in charge. Tom went to meet them, Evelyn close behind. "Help you, gentlemen?" Tom asked. The lead rider, a grizzled man with a scarred face and tired eyes, tipped his hat. "Heard Mason Blackridge might be hiring. We're looking for work." "Hiring?" Tom shook his head. "Ranch is barely keeping the workers we got." "Where'd you hear we were hiring?" "Town. Fellow said Blackridge was expanding, might need experienced hands." The rider looked around the ranch with an evaluating eye. "Though I'll admit, place doesn't look like it's expanding much." "We're not," Evelyn said. "Someone gave you bad information." "That's so." The rider's gaze settled on her, and something about his expression made her skin crawl. "You must be the new Mrs. Blackridge. Heard about you too. Town's full of talk about the woman who told Victor Crow to go to hell. Word travels fast. Always does." He smiled, showing missing teeth. "Shame about the hiring. We rode a long way. You sure there's no work?" "We're good with cattle. Good with other things too if the price is right." Tom's hand drifted toward his gun. "We're sure. Appreciate you stopping by, but we can't help you." The riders exchanged glances. Then the leader shrugged. "Guess we'll move on then. Though if things change, we'll be in the area. Could be useful to have extra men around, especially with Crow circling like he is." They rode off, and Evelyn watched them go with a knot in her stomach. "That was wrong," she said quietly. "Yeah," Tom agreed. "Those weren't ranch hands looking for work. Those were scouts. Crow's getting ready to make a move." "How do you know?" "Because I've seen it before. He sends men to test defenses, see who's paying attention, how many guns we've got. Those 4 just did a full sweep of the ranch while pretending to talk about employment." "What do we do?" "We get ready." Tom turned toward the bunkhouse. "Double the watch rotation. Nobody goes anywhere alone, and we need to move the women to a safer location." "The women?" Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "You mean me and May?" "And your sister, unfortunately. I'm not hiding in a cellar while you fight." "Didn't say cellar. Said safer. There's a difference." He studied her face. "You ever been in a real fight, Miss Evelyn? Not an argument. A fight. With guns and blood and people dying?" "No." "Then trust me when I say you don't want to be in the middle of it unless you absolutely have to be." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle whatever came, but Tom's expression stopped her. He wasn't trying to protect her feelings or preserve some outdated notion of feminine delicacy. He was trying to keep her alive. All right, she said. Tell me what you need me to do. They spent the afternoon preparing. Tom had May gather emergency supplies, food, water, medical materials, and store them in the root cellar behind the house. He had the hands check every rifle, every pistol, every box of ammunition. He positioned men at strategic points around the ranch and made sure everyone knew the signal if trouble came. Celeste watched all this with growing alarm. "What's happening?" she demanded, cornering Evelyn in the kitchen. "Why is everyone running around with guns?" "Because we might be attacked. Because Crow's been testing our defenses and he's probably going to move before Mason gets back." Attacked? Celeste's carefully maintained composure cracked. "This is insane. We should leave. Right now. Before what? Before you have to see what life is actually like out here? Before you have to face something that can't be solved with a smile and a pretty dress? Don't be stupid, Evelyn. If Crow attacks, people will die. You could die. Is this ranch really worth that?" The question hit harder than it should have. Was it worth dying for? This place she'd lived for barely 2 months? This life she'd fallen into by accident? But then Evelyn thought about May teaching her to cook, about Tom patiently showing her how to shoot, about the ranch hands who'd started nodding to her in the mornings instead of looking through her, about Mason trusting her to hold things together while he was gone, even though he'd had every reason not to. "Yes," she said quietly. "It is." Celeste stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "You really have lost your mind." "Maybe, but it's my mind to lose." That night, the ranch felt like a powder keg waiting for a spark. Every sound seemed amplified. Every shadow looked like a threat. The hands took turns on watch, 2 hours on and 4 hours off, armed and alert. Evelyn tried to sleep but gave up after an hour of staring at darkness. She dressed and went downstairs to find May in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with mechanical precision. "Can't sleep either?" the older woman asked. "No. Feels wrong to sleep when everyone else is watching for danger. Feels wrong to waste energy when you might need it tomorrow, but I get it." May punched the dough harder than necessary. "Been through 2 range wars in my life. This feels like the start of a third." "How did the other 2 end?" "One ended when both sides ran out of money and men. Other ended when the territorial governor sent troops to restore order. Don't expect the governor's going to help us this time, though. Crow owns too many politicians." Evelyn pulled up a chair and watched May work. The rhythmic motion was almost hypnotic. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn said after a while. "Can't stop you." "Why are you still here? You could get work anywhere, could go somewhere safer. Why stay?" May was quiet for a long moment, her hands never stopping their work. "Same reason you're still here, I suspect. Because running gets old after a while. Because eventually you have to stand somewhere and say, 'This is mine, this matters, this is worth defending.'" She shaped the dough into loaves with practiced efficiency. "Also because Mason paid for my daughter's medicine when she was sick, a couple years back. Didn't ask to be repaid. Just did it because it needed doing. Hard to leave a man like that to fight alone." "I didn't know you had a daughter." "She's back east. Married to a teacher. Safe and happy, which is all I wanted." May covered the loaves with a cloth. "Point is, everyone here has reasons. The hands could work for Crow and make better money with less danger. They stay because Mason treats them fair, pays on time, doesn't work them to death. Those things matter out here. Celeste doesn't understand that. Celeste doesn't understand much beyond her own reflection." May wiped flour from her hands. "But she's scared now. Scared is dangerous. Scared people make bad choices." As if summoned by the conversation, Celeste appeared in the doorway, wrapped in an expensive robe that looked ridiculous in the rough kitchen. "I can't sleep with all this tension," she announced. "It's like living in a military camp." "That's basically what we are right now," Evelyn said. Celeste pulled up a chair uninvited. "This is madness. You know that, right? Fighting Victor Crow over a ranch that's going to be foreclosed on anyway? Even if you win tonight, you lose in a week when the debt comes due. Mason might find the water rights, and I might sprout wings and fly. We're talking about reality, not fairy tales." Celeste leaned forward, her expression earnest. "I spoke with Mr. Crow before I left. He's willing to be generous. Forgive the debt, let Mason keep a small portion of the ranch, even provide compensation for the hands who want to stay. All he wants in return is you," Evelyn finished. He wants you as Mason's wife instead of me. He wants a proper arrangement, one that makes sense politically and socially. You have to admit it's a fair solution. Except Mason's not here to agree to it. Which is why I need you to convince him when he returns. You're his... Celeste paused, searching for the right word. You're the person he's currently obligated to. If you release him from that obligation, explain that you understand this is for the best, he'll listen. May snorted from the stove. That's the stupidest thing I've heard all week, and I heard Jake try to explain why he thought a chicken was a type of fish. Celeste ignored her, focusing on Evelyn. Think about it rationally. You don't love him. He doesn't love you. This whole arrangement was a mistake from the start. I'm offering you a chance to fix it and save everyone in the process. By giving you what you want. By giving everyone what they need. There's a difference. Evelyn stood up, suddenly exhausted by her sister's presence. Mason comes back in 3 days. If he wants to hear your proposal, he can hear it from you. But I'm not playing messenger for your schemes, and I'm certainly not convincing him to trade me in like a broken tool. You're being selfish. The accusation was so absurd that Evelyn laughed. I'm being selfish? You rode out here uninvited to steal another woman's husband, and I'm the selfish one? He was supposed to be my husband. You stole him first. I didn't steal anything. I was thrown away and he caught me. There's a difference. They faced each other across the kitchen, years of resentment finally bubbling to the surface. May watched from the stove, her hand resting casually near a large knife. You've always been jealous of me, Celeste said quietly. Always resented that I was prettier, more popular, more successful at everything. I was jealous, Evelyn admitted. When we were children, when I thought those things mattered. But you know what I've learned out here? Pretty doesn't fix fences. Popular doesn't save cattle. Success means surviving another day, not winning another admirer. She moved toward the door. You want Mason? You want this ranch? You're going to have to fight for it. Because I'm done stepping aside to make your life easier. She left before Celeste could respond, walked out into the cool night air and let the wind clear her head. The ranch was quiet except for the guards making their rounds. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called, and another answered. This was her home now, rough and dangerous and beautiful in its own harsh way. And she wasn't giving it up without a fight, even if that fight was against her own sister. Tom found her an hour later, still standing in the yard and staring at the stars. You should rest, he said. Can't. Because you're watching for trouble? Because I don't trust what I'll dream about if I sleep. He nodded understanding and stood beside her in comfortable silence. After a while, he spoke again. Mason's lucky, you know. How do you figure? Because someone who fights for what's theirs is worth 10 people who just got handed something they never earned. Tom shifted his rifle to his other shoulder. Your sister might be charming, but charm runs out when things get hard. You're the kind of person who gets harder when things get hard. That's what this land needs. You really think Mason sees it that way? I think Mason's about to come back and find out what he actually has. Whether he's smart enough to recognize it. Tom shrugged. That's on him. But you've done everything right, remember that. 2 more days passed in grinding tension. Celeste continued her campaign to win over the ranch hands, and Evelyn had to admit it was working. The men looked at her sister with something approaching worship, hung on her every word, competed for her attention. Even Tom seemed slightly dazed after Celeste spent 20 minutes asking him about his life with apparently genuine interest. But when work needed doing, when decisions needed making, when someone had to stand watch in the freezing pre-dawn hours, it wasn't Celeste they looked to. It was Evelyn. On the 8th day since Mason had left, a rider approached fast from the east. Every gun on the ranch swung toward him until someone recognized the horse. Mason was back. He looked like he'd been through hell. His clothes were dust-caked and torn, his face haggard with exhaustion, his eyes rimmed red from too many days in the saddle with too little sleep. But he was carrying a leather document case. Tom was the first to reach him as he dismounted. Tell me you found something. I found everything. Mason's voice was rough, abraded from dust and shouting over wind. The water rights exist. Old Spanish land grant from 1762, never properly transferred when the territory changed hands. They're still valid, still binding, and they cover every major creek within 20 miles, including the ones Crow's been controlling. A cheer went up from the assembled hands. Tom clapped Mason on the shoulder hard enough to make him stagger. So we can fight the foreclosure? Tom asked. Better. We can trade. Crow wants this ranch because of what's under it. Now that I can prove I legally control water access to half his land, he needs me more than I need him. Mason's smile was sharp, predatory. He can call in the debt, but I can shut off his water, see who blinks first. It was in that moment of triumph, with the ranch hands celebrating around him, that Mason finally looked past the crowd and saw Celeste. She'd positioned herself perfectly on the porch, framed by the doorway, looking like a painting of frontier grace. The wind caught her hair just right, and the afternoon sun made her glow. Mason's smile died. "What is she doing here?" he asked quietly. Evelyn stepped forward before anyone else could answer. "She came to save you. Apparently." "Save me?" "She has a proposal from Crow, trading her for me. Claims it'll solve all our problems." Mason's expression was unreadable. He looked at Celeste on the porch, then at Evelyn standing in the dusty yard. Looked at the document case in his hands, then back at the two women representing two completely different futures. And Evelyn realized with sick certainty that she had no idea which one he would choose. Mason stood in the yard covered in trail dust, the leather document case still clutched in his hand, and Evelyn watched his eyes move between her and Celeste like he was solving an equation he'd never asked to be given. The celebration that had erupted moments before died into uncomfortable silence as every ranch hand suddenly found something fascinating about their boots. "Inside," Mason said finally, his voice carrying the kind of exhaustion that went bone deep. "You two, now." Celeste descended from the porch with the grace of a swan landing on still water, her expression carefully composed into something between concern and hope. Evelyn followed with considerably less elegance, her work boots heavy with dread. The main room felt smaller with the three of them in it. Mason tossed the document case onto the table and poured himself water from the pitcher May kept filled, draining the entire cup without stopping. He poured another, drank half, then finally turned to face them. "Start talking," he said to Celeste. "What proposal?" Celeste smoothed her skirt, a gesture Evelyn recognized from childhood, buying time to arrange her thoughts into their most persuasive form. "Mr. Crow contacted my father several weeks ago. He explained the situation here, the debt, the deadline, the unfortunate circumstances surrounding our arrangement." "Unfortunate," Mason repeated flatly. "You were promised one bride and received another. That's unfortunate by any definition." Celeste's voice carried sympathy like a weapon. "I came here to correct that mistake. Victor is willing to forgive your debt entirely if you agree to the original arrangement, me as your wife. The ranch stays yours. Everyone benefits." Everyone except Evelyn. Evelyn would be compensated, of course. She could return to Boston, resume her life there. It's what she's accustomed to, what she understands. Celeste glanced at Evelyn with something that might have been pity if it wasn't so calculated. The frontier isn't for everyone. There's no shame in admitting defeat. Mason set down his cup with deliberate care. "You rode all the way out here, uninvited, to offer me a deal you made with the man trying to destroy me? I rode here to save you from making a terrible mistake, to save this ranch, to give everyone what they actually want instead of settling for what circumstance forced on them. And what do I want, according to you?" Celeste's smile was soft, knowing. "You want a wife who can help you navigate the political realities of this valley. Someone who understands how to deal with men like Victor Crow. Someone who can be an asset instead of a liability." She stepped closer, and Evelyn noticed how the afternoon light caught her hair, made her skin seem to glow. "You want what you were promised, Mason, what you paid for, what you deserve." The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Evelyn realized her hands were clenched so tight her nails were cutting into her palms. She forced them open, made herself breathe. Mason looked at Celeste for a long moment, then he turned to Evelyn. "You've been quiet," he said. "That's unusual for you. Wasn't aware my opinion mattered. It's your life we're discussing. Your opinion matters." He crossed his arms. "What do you think of your sister's proposal?" Evelyn felt Celeste's eyes on her, willing her to play along, to be reasonable, to step aside gracefully like she'd done her entire life. The smart move would be to agree, to admit this was all a mistake, to take the escape being offered and disappear back into the shadows where nobody wanted but nobody minded. But standing there in that rough room with dirt under her nails and calluses on her hands, Evelyn realized she was done making the smart move. "I think," she said slowly, "that Celeste is very good at making things sound reasonable when they're anything but. I think Victor Crow doesn't forgive debts out of kindness, and I think any deal that comes through him is probably poison wrapped in silk." Celeste's composure cracked just slightly. "I'm trying to help you." "You're trying to help yourself, like always." Evelyn turned to Mason. "But she's right about one thing. You did pay for a suitable wife, someone who could be an asset, someone who understands how to navigate this world." She gestured at Celeste. "She's everything I'm not. Beautiful, charming, educated in all the ways that matter to society. If that's what you need, then she's your answer." "And if it's not what I need?" The question hung in the air like smoke. "Then you've got a choice to make," Evelyn said. "Either way, I need to know. Because I'm done being the temporary solution to someone else's problem." Mason rubbed his face with both hands, a gesture of pure exhaustion. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but firm. "Celeste, I appreciate you coming all this way, but I'm not interested in your proposal, or Crow's deal, or any arrangement that treats people like trading cards." Celeste's mask slipped completely, revealing genuine shock underneath. "You're refusing? Do you understand what you're turning down? A life tied to a man who tried to destroy me? Yeah, I understand perfectly. This is insane. You have the water rights now. You said so yourself. Use them to negotiate with Victor, but don't make him an enemy over some misplaced sense of pride. Accept my offer. Save the ranch the smart way instead of..." "The smart way," Mason interrupted, his voice hardening, "would have been sending Evelyn away the day she arrived. The smart way would have been paying Crow's extortion prices and keeping my head down. The smart way would be accepting your deal right now and solving all my problems with one signature." He picked up the document case. "But I've spent 8 days riding hard enough to kill my horse, sleeping 4 hours a night, and searching through records so old they practically crumbled in my hands. You know why? Because you're stubborn," Celeste said. "Because someone told me I was already dying slowly and I needed to choose how I went out." He looked at Evelyn. "Someone who refused to quit even when quitting made sense. Someone who stared down armed men from a window and bled into fence wire to save a calf worth maybe $10. His attention returned to Celeste. "That someone wasn't you." The words landed like hammer blows. Celeste's face went through a rapid series of expressions: disbelief, anger, humiliation, before settling on cold fury. "You're choosing her? The sister nobody wanted? The one who embarrassed herself in town and nearly started a war with Crow? I'm choosing the person who kept this ranch running while I was gone, who earned the loyalty of my men, who didn't need beauty or charm to prove her worth because she proved it with work." Mason's voice softened slightly. "You're right that you would have been the smart choice. 2 months ago, I would have jumped at the chance to fix my mistake. But she's not the mistake. Thinking I could buy a wife like I'd buy cattle, that was the mistake." Celeste looked between them, her breathing quick and shallow. "Father was right about you. You're just a frontier brute who doesn't understand value when it's handed to him." "Then I guess we're well matched," Evelyn said quietly, "since he thinks the same about me." "This isn't over," Celeste hissed. "Victor Crow isn't going to accept this. He'll take this ranch, and when he does, you'll wish you'd been smart enough to take my offer." "Maybe," Mason agreed. "But at least we'll go down fighting instead of surrendering to stay comfortable." Celeste swept toward the door, then paused with her hand on the frame. She looked back at Evelyn, and for just a moment, genuine hurt flickered across her face. "I really was trying to help you," she said. "I know you don't believe that, but I remember when we were children, before everything got complicated. I remember my sister, and I thought..." She shook her head. "It doesn't matter what I thought. Clearly, you've made your choice." She left, and they could hear her outside issuing sharp orders to her servants about packing immediately. Evelyn and Mason stood in the sudden silence, neither quite looking at the other. "You didn't have to do that," Evelyn said finally. "Which part?" "Any of it. Refusing her deal, defending me, acting like I'm something more than the substitute you got stuck with." Mason moved to the window and watched Celeste's servants scrambling to load wagons. "You think that's what I was doing? Acting?" "I think you're exhausted and probably not thinking clearly.
I think tomorrow you might wake up and regret turning down a solution to all your problems.
All my problems, he repeated. You know what my biggest problem was when I left here? It wasn't Crow. Wasn't the debt. It was knowing I'd left the ranch in hands I didn't fully trust. Knowing that if something went wrong, it would be my fault for putting people in danger. And Tom sent me updates. Every other day, whenever he could find a rider heading east. He told me about the fence breaks, the well pump, Crow's scouts, the confrontation in your window. Mason turned to face her. He also told me how you handled it, all of it, without falling apart or running or making excuses. I made plenty of mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. The question is whether you learn from them or repeat them. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. This came with Tom's last update, 3 days ago. He handed it to her. Evelyn unfolded it and recognized Tom's careful handwriting. Boss, she's tougher than we gave her credit for. Smarter, too. Ranch is holding together because of her, not despite her. Don't know what you're planning when you get back, but if you're thinking of sending her away, think again. We need her. T. Evelyn read it twice, her throat tight. He shouldn't have sent this. Probably not. But he did. And he was right. Mason took the paper back and tucked it away. I came back here planning to use these water rights to negotiate some kind of peace with Crow. Thought maybe we could all walk away with something. But watching your sister try to trade you like damaged goods? He shook his head. Reminded me why I hate men like Crow in the first place. They think everything has a price. Everyone can be bought or traded or discarded when they're no longer useful.
You're not like that. I was. When I sent for a mail-order bride like I was ordering equipment from a catalog, when I treated you like an inconvenience instead of a person. He met her eyes. I'm sorry for that. Should have said it weeks ago. The apology hit harder than any insult could have. Evelyn felt something crack in her chest, something she'd been holding together through pure stubbornness. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Be the person you need. Be someone worth choosing. Good thing I'm not asking you to be anything except yourself. Outside, Celeste's wagons were pulling away, expensive and out of place, heading back toward civilization. Evelyn watched them go and felt something like relief mixed with regret. Her sister would go back to Boston, tell their father everything, paint Evelyn as either a fool or a villain depending on her mood. The Mercer family would write her off completely if they hadn't already. And somehow, that felt like freedom. May appeared in the doorway, took one look at both of them, and snorted. You two done having your dramatic moment? Because there's still work to do and ranch hands are getting nervous waiting for orders. What kind of orders? Mason asked. The kind where you tell them whether we're going to war with Crow or trying to negotiate. Because those are different kinds of preparations. Mason looked at the document case on the table. We're going to negotiate, but from a position of strength, not desperation. Get the men fed and rested. Tomorrow morning, I'm riding to Crow's ranch with these water rights documents. Going to explain his new reality. You're going alone? Tom had appeared behind May, having clearly been listening. Taking 2 men for appearance, but yes, essentially alone. Crow responds to power, not threats. If I show up with an army, he'll see it as weakness disguised as strength. Or he'll have you killed the second you step on his land, Tom countered. Possible. But if these documents are as solid as the territorial clerk claims, killing me just makes the situation worse for him. They're filed with the government now, on record. Even if I die, the water rights pass to my estate. He'd still have to negotiate with someone. With who? Evelyn asked. You don't have family. If something happens to you, who inherits? The question hung in the air awkwardly. Mason's jaw tightened. Hadn't gotten that far in my planning, he admitted. Then get that far, May said sharply. Because riding into enemy territory without a will is stupid, even by frontier standards. Something happens to you. This whole ranch falls apart fighting over scraps. Is that what you want? No. Then fix it, tonight. Write down who gets what. Make it legal. Make it clear. She pointed at Evelyn. And stop dancing around the obvious. You two need to have a real conversation about what happens next. Not this half-said implication nonsense. Actual words about actual futures. She left, Tom trailing behind her with a poorly concealed smirk. She's terrifying, Evelyn said. Yeah, but she's right. Mason pulled out a chair and sat heavily, his exhaustion finally catching up to him. We do need to talk.
about what this is, what it could be, what you want it to be. Evelyn sat across from him, the table between them like a negotiating space. I don't want to go back to Boston. That's what you don't want. What do you want? It was such a simple question, and yet Evelyn realized she'd spent her entire life being told what she should want, what she was supposed to want, what would be acceptable for her to want. Nobody had ever just asked her directly. I want to stay here, she said slowly, testing the words. I want to keep working on this ranch, learning, getting better at things. I want to be part of something that matters instead of just existing in the margins of someone else's life. That's a life choice, not a relationship choice. Isn't it the same thing out here? Mason considered that. Maybe. Probably. This place doesn't really allow for separation between who you are and what you do. He drummed his fingers on the table, a nervous gesture she'd never seen from him before. I need to know if you're staying because you want this ranch or because you want... He trailed off. You? Evelyn finished. I don't know yet. Is that honest enough? More honest than most people manage. I know I respect you. I know I'd fight for this place and the people on it. I know that watching you choose me over Celeste felt like the first time in my life someone picked me first. She twisted her rough hands together. But I also know that 2 months isn't enough time to know if what I feel is real or just gratitude for not being thrown away again. Fair enough. Mason stood and moved to the window again, his silhouette dark against the fading light. Here's what I know. I thought I wanted a wife who could navigate society, host parties, make me look good to the right people. Turned out what I actually needed was a partner who could handle a crisis, make hard decisions, and wouldn't break when things got rough. You're the latter. Don't know if that's enough to build on, but it's more than I had with my first wife. The mention of his dead wife landed like a stone in still water. Evelyn had heard the rumors, the whispered stories, but Mason had never spoken about her directly. What was she like? Evelyn asked quietly. Sarah, she was... He paused, searching for words. She was kind, gentle, everything you're supposed to want in a wife. She hated it here. Hated the isolation, the work, the constant struggle, tried to adapt because she thought that's what marriage meant. But it killed her. Maybe not directly, but the misery weakened her. When the fever came, she had nothing left to fight with. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I brought her here. Sorry I convinced myself that love would be enough to make her happy in a place she despised. He turned to face Evelyn. That's why I wanted someone practical this time. Someone who knew what they were getting into. When your father sent you instead of Celeste, I saw it as another disaster. Another person who'd be miserable and make me feel guilty for it. And now? Now I think maybe your father did me a favor without meaning to. Celeste would have been miserable here. Might have lasted longer than Sarah because she's tougher, but eventually she would have demanded we leave, move to the city, abandon everything I've built. You? He shook his head slowly. You belong here in a way I didn't expect. Maybe didn't want to admit because it complicated things. Evelyn stood and joined him at the window. Outside, the ranch was settling into evening routines. Hands heading to the bunkhouse, horses moving toward shelter. The familiar rhythms of a working ranch preparing for night. If I stay, she said, I need it to be real. Not an obligation. Not you making the best of a bad situation. I've spent my whole life being the consolation prize. I won't do that here. What are you asking for? Time. To figure out if what we have is worth building on. To see if partnership can become something more. To know that if it doesn't, I'm still welcome here as myself, not as your wife. Mason was quiet for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. Deal. You stay, we figure it out together, and either way you've got a place here, as a partner, if nothing else. Evelyn shook his hand, feeling the calluses that matched her own. It wasn't romantic, wasn't the sweeping declaration that novels promised, but it was honest and real and built on something more solid than pretty words. Now, Mason said, releasing her hand, I need to write that what May demanded, and you need to eat something. You look like you haven't had a full meal in days. Been too nervous to eat. Well, stop being nervous. Crow's still out there. Save your anxiety for actual threats instead of wasting it on your sister. They moved into the kitchen where May had left food waiting, and for the first time in days, Evelyn felt something like peace. Temporary, fragile, but real. The peace lasted exactly 12 hours. Mason was up before dawn, dressed for traveling and checking his weapons with mechanical efficiency. Tom had picked two experienced hands to ride with him, Jake and a scarred older man named Dutch, who'd apparently fought in 3 range wars and survived them all. "We should be back by nightfall," Mason said, adjusting his gun belt. "Crow's Ranch is 4 hours hard riding. If we're not back by midnight, assume something went wrong." "And if something goes wrong?" Evelyn asked. "Then you lock down the ranch, send someone to the territorial marshal, and pray the water rights documentation is enough to keep Crow from just taking everything." He picked up the document case. "But it won't come to that. Crow's smart enough to recognize when he's beaten." "Is he?" Mason smiled grimly. "Guess we'll find out." He rode out with Jake and Dutch as the sun was painting the horizon red and gold. Evelyn watched them go with May beside her, both women silent. "This is when it gets dangerous," May said finally. "Not the riding out, the waiting. Waiting makes people stupid." "What should I do?" "Work, stay busy, don't let the hands see you worried." May headed toward the kitchen. "And help me prepare for the possibility that Mason doesn't come back. Because hope's good, but preparation's better." The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Evelyn threw herself into every task she could find, anything to keep her mind from spiraling. She helped May prepare enough food to feed an army. She checked every rifle and box of ammunition with Tom. She walked the fence lines until her legs ached. And she waited. Noon came and went. Afternoon stretched into evening. The sun began its descent toward the western horizon, and still no riders appeared from the south. Tom organized the evening watch with military precision, positioning men at every approach to the ranch. "If Crow does something stupid, we'll see them coming," he assured Evelyn, "and we'll be ready." "You really think he'd attack, even knowing about the water rights?" "I think desperate men do desperate things, and if Mason backed him into a corner, Crow might decide burning everything down is better than admitting defeat." 8 o'clock? 9. 10. The ranch hands were getting restless, checking weapons and watching the horizon. Evelyn sat on the porch with a rifle across her lap she barely knew how to use, waiting for sounds that might mean disaster. 11 o'clock brought the sound of horses, multiple riders moving fast. "Everyone up!" Tom shouted. "Defensive positions!" The ranch erupted into controlled chaos. Men grabbed weapons and took cover behind walls, troughs, anything solid. Evelyn's heart hammered as she raised the rifle, her hands slippery with nervous sweat. The riders burst into view, 5 horses, pushed hard, coming in fast from the south. "Hold fire!" Tom called. "That's Mason!" Relief flooded through Evelyn so powerfully she nearly dropped the rifle. Mason was in the lead, Jake and Dutch flanking him, but there were 2 additional horses and riders she didn't recognize. They pulled up in the yard, horses blowing hard from the run. Mason dismounted and immediately started issuing orders. "Tom, get these horses taken care of. May, we need food for 7. These 2," he indicated the unknown riders, "are staying tonight. Guards stay posted. Nobody relaxes until I say so." "What happened?" Tom demanded. "Inside. 5 minutes. Everyone who needs to know." Mason's expression was grim, triumphant, and exhausted all at once. In the main room, the core group gathered. Mason, Tom, May, Evelyn, and the 2 strangers who turned out to be Crow's lawyer and accountant. "Crow accepted the situation," Mason said without preamble. "Wasn't happy about it, but he's not stupid. The water rights are ironclad. If he wants water access for his cattle, he has to negotiate with me, not the other way around." "So the debt?" Tom asked. "Forgiven. Completely. In exchange for a water-sharing agreement that gives him reasonable access but not control. His lawyer drafted it right there. It's done." The room erupted in celebration. May actually hugged Tom, which startled both of them. The ranch hands who'd crowded near the door let out whoops of joy, but Evelyn watched Mason's face and saw something else underneath the relief. "What's the catch?" she asked quietly. The room went silent. Mason's expression tightened. "Crow accepted the terms," he said slowly, "but he made it clear this isn't over, not personally. He said, and I quote, 'You won this round, Blackridge, but frontier justice has a way of settling scores that courts can't touch. Watch your back and watch hers.'" The celebration died instantly. "He threatened Evelyn?" Tom's hand moved to his gun. "He threatened all of us. But he specifically mentioned the woman who told him to go to hell, said she made it personal when she humiliated him in front of his own people. Mason's eyes found Evelyn's. He's not going to forget that. Or forgive it. May swore creatively. So we won the ranch but started a blood feud. Perfect. Not a blood feud, Mason corrected. Crow's too smart for open warfare now that the legal battle's lost. But accidents happen on the frontier. People disappear. Fires start mysteriously. He'll find ways to make us pay that can't be traced back to him. Then we stay alert, Tom said. Watch each other's backs. Don't give him opportunities. The lawyer, a thin man with nervous eyes, cleared his throat. If I may, Mr. Crow authorized me to deliver one additional message. He's willing to forget Miss Mercer's insult entirely if she agrees to leave the valley. He'll even provide transportation and compensation. He views her as the instigator of this entire conflict. Remove her from the equation, and he's prepared to maintain peaceful relations. Every eye in the room turned to Evelyn. Absolutely not, Mason said before she could speak. Perhaps Miss Mercer should decide for herself, the lawyer suggested carefully. She's not going anywhere, Tom added. Crow doesn't get to dictate who lives on Blackridge land. Gentlemen, I'm just delivering the message. Then the message is received and rejected. Mason cut him off. Tell Crow that Miss Mercer stays. Tell him if he has a problem with that, he can come discuss it with me personally. Bring lawyers if he wants. Bring guns if he's stupid. Either way, she stays. The lawyer nodded quickly and made notes. The accountant looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. After they'd been shown to the bunkhouse for the night, May started laying out food while the others drifted away to their duties. Evelyn remained frozen in her chair, processing what had just happened. Mason sat across from her, the exhaustion finally showing through his controlled facade. You defended me, Evelyn said quietly. Again. Yeah. Crow offered you peace. All you had to do was let me go. All I had to do was prove I'm no better than your father, throwing you away when you became inconvenient. Mason reached across the table and took her hand. Not happening. You stay as long as you want to stay, and if Crow doesn't like it, that's his problem to solve. Evelyn looked at their joined hands, his rough and scarred, hers equally marked by work. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Probably. He might actually try to kill one of us. Yeah. And you're okay with that? Putting yourself and everyone here in danger because you won't hand over one person? Mason's grip tightened slightly. You're not just one person. You're part of this ranch now, part of what we're fighting for, and we don't abandon our own just because it gets hard. He stood, pulling her up with him. Now eat something. You're going to need your strength for what comes next. What comes next? We build. We grow. We show Crow and everyone else in this valley that Blackridge Ranch isn't something you can break or buy or intimidate into submission. He smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. And we do it together, however messy that turns out to be. Later, alone in her small room with the night sounds of the ranch settling around her, Evelyn thought about everything that had changed in 2 months. She'd arrived as unwanted cargo, been dumped on a stranger's land, and expected to disappear into invisibility. Instead, she'd found people worth fighting for. Work that mattered. A place that felt like home, even when it was hard. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something that could become love. Not the fairy tale kind that novels promised, but the rough, honest, hard-won kind that survives storms and thieves and blood feuds. The kind worth building a life on. Outside her window, she could see Tom making rounds, checking guards, ensuring the ranch was secure. Could hear May in the kitchen below, still puttering around despite the late hour. Could sense Mason in his room down the hall, probably staring at the same ceiling she was, wondering if they'd made the right choices. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Crow wouldn't forget his humiliation. The valley wouldn't suddenly become safe. The work would still be brutal and unending. But for the first time in her life, Evelyn wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. She was ready for it. The peace lasted 3 weeks before Crow made his move. It started small, cut water lines, stolen supplies, fence breaks that happened in the night when guards were spread thin. Mason doubled the patrols, but they couldn't be everywhere at once. The ranch was hemorrhaging resources faster than they could replace them. He's trying to bleed us dry without direct confrontation, Tom said one morning, examining another severed pipe. Make it too expensive to keep operating. Then we make it expensive for him too, Evelyn said. She'd been thinking about this, turning it over in her mind during sleepless nights. The water rights. We're not using them. Mason looked up sharply. What do you mean? I mean, we control water access to half his land. What if we started enforcing that strictly, by the letter of the law? That would start a war. We're already in a war. We're just losing it slowly. Evelyn met his eyes. You told me dying slowly is still dying. Time to stop playing defense. Tom grinned. I like how she thinks. They implemented the plan that afternoon. Mason sent official notice to Crow. All water usage on Crow's land would now require documented permits and payment of fees as outlined in the original Spanish land grants. Failure to comply would result in water being cut off entirely. The response came faster than expected. 2 days later, a rider arrived with a message. Crow wanted to meet, neutral ground, just the two of them. It's a trap, Tom said immediately. Probably, Mason agreed, but I'm going anyway. Then I'm coming too, Evelyn said. Absolutely not. He threatened me specifically, remember? Said I made it personal. If this is about ending things, I need to be there. She saw him preparing to argue. I'm not asking permission, Mason. I'm telling you how this is going to happen. They rode out the next morning, Mason, Evelyn, and Tom, trailing at a distance with a rifle. The meeting place was an abandoned line shack halfway between the two ranches, exposed enough that an ambush would be visible from miles away. Crow was already there, sitting on his horse like a king surveying territory. He was older than Evelyn expected, maybe 50, with silver hair and the kind of face that suggested he'd been handsome once before cruelty had reshaped it. Blackridge, he said, nodding. Then his eyes found Evelyn. And the mouth that started all this trouble. Interesting that you'd bring her. She's my wife, Mason said flatly. Where I go, she goes. Wife? Crow's eyebrows rose. Well, that does complicate things, doesn't it? He dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate. I came here to propose a solution, a way we can both walk away from this without destroying each other. I'm listening. I'll buy the water rights from you, fair market value plus 20%. You keep your ranch, I get guaranteed access to water, we both move on with our lives. The rights aren't for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price. Name it. Mason shook his head. You don't understand, this isn't about money. It's about making sure you can't strangle every small rancher in this valley. The water stays public access, controlled by people who won't use it as a weapon. Crow's pleasant expression finally cracked. You self-righteous fool. You think you're protecting people? You're signing their death warrants. I've been keeping this valley stable for 20 years. Without me, it'll descend into chaos. Every two-bit operation competing for resources, fighting over scraps. Is that what you want? I want people to have a chance, to build something without you deciding whether they deserve to survive. Noble. Stupid, but noble. Crow turned his attention back to Evelyn. This is your fault, you know. If you just accepted your place, none of this would be necessary. Your sister understood how things work. Why couldn't you? Because I'm not my sister, Evelyn said quietly. And I don't accept that powerful men get to decide who deserves dignity and who doesn't. Dignity? Crow laughed, bitter and sharp. You want to talk about dignity? I built this valley from nothing, created jobs, brought civilization, made it possible for people to survive out here. And you're going to lecture me about dignity? You built an empire on other people's suffering, Evelyn shot back. That's not civilization. It's just organized cruelty with better manners. For a moment, Crow looked like he might draw his gun. Then he smiled, cold and calculated. You've made your choice then. Both of you. He mounted his horse. I gave you a way out. Remember that when everything falls apart. He rode off, and Evelyn felt Mason's hand find hers. That went well, she said shakily. About as expected. Mason watched Crow disappear toward the horizon. Now we prepare for whatever he does next. What Crow did next was brutal and efficient. 3 nights later, riders hit the Wilson Ranch again, the same one that had been raided before. This time, they burned everything. The main house, the barns, the storage sheds. The Wilson family barely escaped with their lives. The message was clear. Align with Blackridge, and this is what happens. But Crow had miscalculated. Instead of scaring the other ranchers into submission, the attack galvanized them. Within 2 days, 6 ranches had sent riders to Black Ridge with the same message. They were ready to organize, ready to fight back, ready to end Crow's control over the valley. Mason called a meeting at the ranch, and this time every independent operation within 50 miles sent representatives. They gathered in the yard, grim-faced and armed, ready for war. "We can't win through violence," Mason told them. "Crow has more men and more money, but we don't need to win through violence. We need to win through law." He laid out the plan. The water rights were documented and legal. If they could get the territorial governor involved, prove that Crow had been operating illegally for years, they could strip him of his control without firing a shot. "That takes time," one rancher objected. "Time Crow will use to destroy us all." "Then we make sure he can't," Evelyn said, stepping forward. Every eye turned to her. "We rotate guards between ranches, share resources, make it impossible for him to isolate anyone. He tries to burn one of us. He faces all of us." "Who put you in charge?" someone muttered. "Nobody. But I'm the one he threatened specifically, which means I've got the most reason to see this through." She looked around at the assembled ranchers. "You can listen or not. But I've survived 2 months of Crow trying to break me. I'm still here. That should count for something." The ranchers exchanged glances. Then the old weathered one who'd spoken at the first meeting nodded slowly. "She's got steel in her spine, I'll give her that." He turned to the group. "I'm in. My ranch will share guards and supplies. We do this together or we don't do it at all." One by one, the others agreed. Over the next 2 weeks, the valley transformed. Ranches that had operated in isolation for decades started working as a unit. They shared guards, pooled resources, and sent a joint delegation to the territorial capital with evidence of Crow's crimes. Crow fought back with everything he had. He sent raiders, tried to bribe officials, called in favors from corrupt politicians. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the ranchers refused to break. The end came on a Tuesday morning when a federal marshal arrived with a warrant for Crow's arrest. Charges included fraud, extortion, cattle rustling, arson, and conspiracy to commit murder. The list was 3 pages long. Crow was taken into custody without a fight. His ranch was seized to pay restitution to his victims. His men scattered, looking for work elsewhere, and Red Hollow Valley was finally free. The celebration that night at Black Ridge Ranch was loud and chaotic. Ranchers who'd competed bitterly for years now shared drinks and made plans for cooperation. Their families mixed and mingled, children running wild in the darkness. Evelyn stood on the porch watching it all, feeling Mason's arm settle around her shoulders. "You did this," he said quietly. "We did this. All of us. You started it by refusing to leave, by standing up to him when it would have been easier to run." He pulled her closer. "I was wrong about you. When you first arrived, I saw a burden, a mistake, someone I'd have to carry. And now? Now I see the strongest person I know. Someone who saved this ranch more times than I can count. Someone who saved me from becoming exactly what Crow was, isolated, bitter, using power to hurt people because I'd forgotten how to do anything else." Evelyn turned to face him. "I want to make this real. Not just partners running a ranch. Actually married. We are actually married. We had a ceremony. That's not the same thing." She took a breath. "I want what you had with Sarah. The real thing. Love, not just respect. Partnership built on more than survival." Mason was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. The first truly relaxed smile she'd ever seen from him. "Then I guess it's good I already love you. Makes the whole marriage thing easier." She hit his arm. "You couldn't lead with that?" "Just did." He kissed her, and this time there was nothing awkward about it. Just certainty and warmth and the beginning of something that might actually last. May appeared in the doorway behind them. "Stop being romantic and get inside. I need help serving food, and you two are the hosts." "We're having a moment," Mason protested. "Have it later. Right now you've got responsibilities." They went inside, and Evelyn thought about how much had changed in 4 months. She'd arrived as nobody's choice, been dumped on hostile land, expected to fail or disappear. Instead, she'd helped free an entire valley from tyranny, had built a community where there'd been only isolation, had found love in the last place she'd expected it, and most importantly, she'd found herself. Not the version her father wanted, Not the shadow of her sister, but the actual person she was underneath all the expectations and dismissals. Someone strong, capable, worth choosing. The unwanted bride had become irreplaceable. The substitute had proven more valuable than the original. The woman nobody wanted had saved everyone. Later that night, alone in the bedroom they now actually shared, Mason asked her something he'd been avoiding. "Do you ever regret it? That your father sent you instead of Celeste?" Evelyn thought about Boston, about the life she'd left behind, about all the things she'd lost when she was thrown away like garbage. Then she thought about rough hands and honest work, about May's gruff affection and Tom's quiet loyalty, about a valley full of people who'd learned to stand together, about a husband who chose her every day, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. "No," she said simply. "Not even a little bit." "Good, because I'm keeping you. You better." She fell asleep that night knowing she was exactly where she belonged. Not in Boston's society where beauty and breeding mattered more than character. Not in her father's house where she'd always be the disappointment. Not even in the fantasy version of frontier life that novels promised, but in the real, messy, difficult, beautiful truth of a life she'd fought for and earned and claimed as her own. The unwanted daughter had become the woman the frontier needed. The wrong bride had become the right wife. The substitute had become the original. And Red Hollow Valley, once a place of fear and isolation, had become home. Not because it was easy, not because it was safe, not because anyone had handed her anything, but because she'd stood her ground when the world told her to disappear, because she'd fought for herself when nobody else would, because she'd looked at the impossible and decided to do it anyway. And that was worth more than all the approval and acceptance she'd never gotten from the people who should have loved her. Because the only approval that truly mattered was her own. And finally, after 24 years of trying to be enough for other people, Evelyn Blackridge knew she was enough for herself. That was the real victory. Not defeating Crow, not saving the ranch, not even finding love, but learning that she'd always been worth saving. She just needed to save herself first.